Good evening and welcome everyone to this meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee, especially those members of the public who are watching the streaming of this meeting online. I'm Councillor Clive Hooker, Chairman of this committee. The members of the committee in attendance this evening are Councillors Adrian Abbs, Phil Barnett, Jeff Cant, Hilary Cole, Caroline Culver, Dennis Bennyworth, Tony Vickers, who is the Vice Chairman of the committee, and Howard Wollaston. And the following officers are in attendance to present, advise and support the meeting this evening. And they are Simon Till, Matthew Shepherd and Sian Cutts, our planning officers, Anna Smye, our environmental health officer, Paul Goddard, our highways engineer, Stuart Clark, our drainage engineer, Sharon Armour will be our legal advisor this evening, and Jenny Legg will clerk the meeting. I'm also assisted by Stephen Chard, who will be the Zoom host and look after us with regards to the Zoom meeting this evening. I will now ask Mrs. Legg to remind members and other attendees about the way we conduct council meetings via Zoom. Mrs. Legg, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. Standard Zoom reminders will be shared on screen shortly. In addition to these points, if it becomes necessary for any members to telephone into the meeting, they won't be able to signal to speak. Therefore, once everyone who has raised a Zoom hand has spoken, I will ask the Chairman to invite anyone who has telephoned in to speak in order. Voting on the planning applications will take place via a named vote. Members will be asked in turn by the legal advisor how they wish to vote, by stating they are for or against the proposal, or if they wish to abstain. Please remember to unmute yourself when voting. Any other votes will be conducted via a show of actual hands during the meeting. Unless the committee asks for the vote to be recorded, the outcome of the named vote will not appear in the minutes. So anyone wishing their vote to be recorded must indicate this before the vote is taken. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the chairman will adjourn and advise the committee of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it is a short adjournment, you will be able to rejoin the Zoom meeting, otherwise a fresh appointment will be sent. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed?
No, we don't have any. We don't have any questions. No, we don't have any questions. Thank you, members. We now move on to our agenda this evening. Item 1. Apologies, Mrs. Legg. Do we have any apologies, please?
No, we don't have any apologies this evening, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, as you will see, is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of October. Members, these minutes will be carried over to our next meeting to be held on the 11th of November, which in fact is a week tonight. Move on to item 3. Members, anybody have any declarations of interest, please? If you could put up your hand. Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. With regard to agenda item 4, 4.3 and 4.2, I'm a member of Chieveley Parish Council, and when these matters were discussed at Chieveley Parish Council, I did state at that time that I would review these applications anew in light of any other information that has come forward in the interim. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Did I see Councillor Culver?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that I've been lobbied on item 1 and it is in my ward, but I will make a decision tonight based on the evidence that I hear during the meeting.
Thank you very much. I'm looking down, I can see no more blue hands, so thank you for those declarations of interest. I now move on to item 4 of the agenda, which is the planning applications. We have 3 applications this evening. The first is the Old Station Business Park at Compton. The second is Vine Cottage at Courage. And the third is the bungalow.
I couldn't find a way of getting your attention there in time. I do have.
Sorry.
It's Councillor Abbs speaking. I do have a declaration of interest. I've been lobbied actually to ask a question in at item 5. So I'll need clarification before whether I can or cannot do that as we reach that particular item.
Okay, Mr. Shard, on my screen, the hands, the blue hands, are not coming to the top of the list of attenders. So if I miss it for any reason, maybe yourself or Mrs. Legg could bring that to my attention, or if you can do an adjustment that I can get those hands to the top, it would very much be very helpful. Thank you. Okay. So I go back to item 4. As I say, we have 3 applications: the Old Station Business Park at Compton, Vine Cottage at Courage, and the bungalow at Down End at Cheveley. Just as an introduction and for the benefit of those watching online, I will briefly outline the format of each of the applications this evening. The officers will present the application to the committee. The drawings, site plans, and any deemed relevant material submitted on the planning file will be shown as part of that presentation. I will then invite the clerk to read out the 500-word submissions. These will be shown on the screen for additional clarity from the following groups and in this order. Firstly, the parish council, any objectors, from supporters, and then from the applicant and agent. On conclusion of those 4 500-word submissions, I will ask members if they have any questions of clarification on that submission or of the individual 500-word submissions of which members of the committee will have read. If they have any questions, attendees will be invited into the meeting to answer them. If they do not have any questions, the attendees will not be invited into the meeting. On conclusion of answering any questions, the attendees will be invited back to the waiting room. Following this, I will then invite the ward member to speak. They will have 5 minutes to present their case. Members may then ask them questions of clarification. The committee members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification of the officers' presentations. The committee will then debate the application and then they will vote on a decision. So we'll now, members, move on to the applications this evening. And the first application is application number 20/01226. This is a full planning application for retrospective works at the Old Station Business Park at Compton. And this has come to committee this evening due to a ward member call-in. And I'll ask Mr. Shepherd, our planning officer, to present the application this evening. Mr. Shepherd, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the front page of the agenda presents the proposal at the Old Station Business Park. It includes a retrospective application for alterations to units 10 and 12, including external ductwork, external gantry, plant machinery, solvent stores, and internal works. The internal works are listed in full in that proposal. It has come to committee due to ward member call-in if officers are looking to recommend approval. Your officers are proposing that the head of planning and development be authorised to grant planning permission subject to conditions. I'll now take you through and share my screen to show the presentation. Can I just confirm that you can all see that for me?
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd.
Okay, great. So first up, I'll just show you the location plan for the application. So it sets out the location of this business park within Compton. So the units considered tonight are 10, 11, 12. So this is the development site in the centre of the screen. The previous applications considered by committee last meeting revolved around 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8 and 9 in the centre of the application. There is public right of way to the western boundary of the application site, and also the nearest residential developments or buildings are huge stables to the west of the application site. Moving across, we see a block plan of the development site, so showing the main building to the centre. We're showing the air handling units to the north, outlining all the car parking spaces. Here to the south, we see the storage containers, the solvent storage containers, and also the landscaping proposals that have been put into place already. Here we see the eastern side elevation, so the elevation submitted to the council for consideration. So the storage containers, which I've outlined on the block plan, and the containers, the gas bottle containers areas, also the air handling units, and the ductwork and gantry work. Here on the next slide shows those pictures of those in situ. You can see a real-time representation of what is being applied for. Moving across, this is the air handling unit, which is a big bone of contention within this application. So it's, you can see here, it's already been installed, painted green, and surrounded by close boarded fencing. If I take you to show, this image is from the west, looking into the site. So you can see here are units 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, and 9 that were considered in the previous committee meeting. This is 10, 11, the building to be considered on this application. You can see the outline of where we are as well within Compton. If I stop sharing my screen, I will come back. So I'll now take you through my report and the appraisal of this report. In essence, in consultation, the parish council have raised objections to the application, but other consultees such as environmental health, highways officers have raised no objections subject to conditions. The report outlines that the principal development is acceptable, although the site is located outside of settlement boundaries. It is located within a brownfield site and an established business site, so it addresses an existing business needs. So in principle, we're supportive of the development. The impact on the landscape character is considered acceptable as well. We are within the Northwest AONB here. Most of the development can be seen from within the site, and the elements of ductwork are close to the building and not readily available or readily visible from the wider landscape. So the impact on the wider landscape on the AONB is considered acceptable to officers. The ducting work has been painted, so it's no longer reflective, and there are also restrictive conditions within our recommendation to restrict any further external lighting. So there's no impact to the dark night skies status of the AONB. The impact on the adjacent public rights of way and highways have been considered acceptable. The external compounds have taken up some car parking spaces, but through negotiations with the applicant and the agent, replacement car parking spaces have been provided, so there's no change in the level of parking on the site. The amended plans also include tree and hedge planting, which has been undertaken already on site. So that was seen in some of the photographs of the previous application as well. So that's already in situ as a conditions to guarantee it's retained and maintained. The main issue with this application, and the one where we have most objections in regards, is the level of noise and the impact of that, of those. Clarify, this application does not include filler units as the previous application that we discussed at the previous meeting. The solvent stores are just at their storage units. They don't have working elements within them that create noise. So there's the main difference between the two applications in terms of external storage containers. There's also a restrictive condition that no further refrigeration units are installed on this specific site to retain some more control on that side. In regards to the noise complaints, these have Leicester's objection have outlined that the air handling units shown in the presentation is the main area of concern and main issue. The air handling units have been reviewed by environmental health and they've raised no objections subject to conditions. It's been identified that additional measures contained within a noise impact assessment dated December 2019 were specific enough to recommend specific mitigation conditions that can be secured as subject to approval, that will reduce any impact on those neighbouring amenity issues. Also, as a condition recommending a timer system is installed as well. So that will switch it off overnight to reduce that impact to neighbouring amenity. In overall conclusion, environmental health have confirmed that these conditions are robust and address the issues and the noise issues that have been raised by both objectors from the planning application and from the environmental health perspective as well. Moving to the update sheet. We had representation made by the parish council noise consultants. That's included within the report on there for you to to review and read. Our environmental health officer, whilst this application has been coming to committee, they've undertaken additional noise monitoring within the affected neighbouring dwellings. This has identified an issue at 100 hertz, as outlined on the update sheet. But it's also identified that this is unlikely to be related to the specifics of this application, i.e. the air handling units of 10 and 12, which are seeking to be approved tonight. This issue could arise from, this noise issue that's been identified could arise from the units of 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, 9, units that planning conditions previously agreed by the committee seek to address within their time limit on those. On that basis, on the plant machinery included within this application specifically, these can be mitigated by the conditions recommended within the report and updated within the update sheets. There is a small amendment to one of the conditions to add in a reference to LAEQ after the decibel levels. This is a more technical jargon from environmental health to ensure that noise measurements are correctly calculated. On that basis, the officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions outlined within the agenda and updated within the update sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Mr. Goddard, any observations on any highways issues with regard to these? See, you had no objections. Anything you'd like to add at this stage?
Chairman, your highway officers have no objection. Originally, the units were taking up some parking spaces, but we received amended plans relocating those spaces. So there's no loss in parking on the site. Therefore, we're content with the proposal subject to the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Members, I do have Mrs. Smythe here, the Environmental Health Officer. She has nothing to add to the presentation, but she will be available should you have any questions on the environmental health issues when it comes to questions of clarification later on in the meeting. So if we can now move on to the word submissions from the public. The first one this evening, Mrs. Legg, could you read out the word submission, please, from Compton Parish Council? Thank you.
Yes, Chairman, I shall just share my screen for you. Compton, hopefully I'll make that a bit bigger. It's not very long. Okay, everyone can see that, I presume. So this is a submission from Compton Parish Council. Following the strengthening of the conditions on 20/01658/FUL to mitigate the noise impact this development has already had on the village residents, Compton PC would like to see the noise associated conditions linked, as it is currently unclear on exactly where the current noise nuisance is originating from. Compton PC will be monitoring the noise changes, planting and any future additions to the building, and trust enforcement will support the parish council and residents should the conditions not be met in timeframes indicated.
Thank you.
That's their submission.
Revert the screen back. Members, do we have any observations on or questions of clarity on that presentation or that from the parish council, please? I'm just going down. I can see no questions. Thank you very much. I won't be inviting Councillor Sims into the meeting. Mrs. Legg, we now move on to the second submission this evening, and this is from the objectors. Could you please read out that one, please?
Yeah, Chairman. So this is the summary of all the objectors for this application. The officers have separated it into the individuals so you can see who's said what. So Mr. Sims, the applicant's own noise report states that the source of the existing noise nuisance cannot be exactly attributed. I would suggest that conditions are put on this application to a similar specification on the noise generated on the whole site. I welcome the limitations on time of use and any assistance in ensuring conditions are complied with. The application is retrospective and the units are in use. There is a noise nuisance from this site and we desperately hope it can be resolved by conditions that are enforced. Dr. and Mrs. Vaughan write, there has been some improvement as a result of switching off one of the refrigerated containers and some temporary mitigation measures. However, the noise nuisance of a low humming sound that is very intrusive has not gone away. The noise has been heard by Mr. Tony McAvoy during a visit on the 2nd of October from the land immediately behind our property, which he felt was comping from the AHU on units 4 to 6. The AHU on units 10 to 12 is basically the same, and a significant contribution to the overall noise has now started to come from this direction. The noise survey did not establish how much noise this AHU could make under significant load, as it wasn't fully operational at the time. I've tried hard to identify the conditions when the noise is worse, but I have no information about loading variability at units 10 to 12. I don't believe Carbosynth know when the plant is noisy because it runs automatically. The solution is to minimise the plant that is required on the site, the time it is on, and removal if the function can be off-site. A timer switching off the equipment at night and at weekends would still leave a noise nuisance during the working week, so mitigation should be the key objective. Please could the committee consider placing a condition that measures are installed and demonstrably shown to mitigate noise nuisance by a reasonable date. Dr. Jones writes, whilst Carbosynth undertakes commendable work and provides employment, it nevertheless has a duty of care and responsibility to respect and maintain both the environmental and social well-being of the location, which can't be overlooked with new buildings and equipment. This area is designated as AONB, and we should do all we can to protect that status. I am specifically objecting to those aspects regarding plant and machinery that create noise that extends beyond the site boundary. Effective and robust mitigation should be a condition to successfully and measurably stop the nuisance noise, so the HVAC isn't heard consistently through the day and timers switch it off at night, weekends and public holidays. I would like to thank the General Manager for their engagement looking at ways to reduce the noise. Any conditions should ensure permanent noise prevention in case of changes in personnel or business practices that might occur. That is that submission, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Megg. Members, any questions on that presentation this evening, please? If you put up your blue hand on the, see Councillor Culver. Yeah, Councillor Culver first, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I do have a question of Mr. Sims. I note that you said that he wouldn't be invited in as a member of the Parish Council, but he is one of the objectors.
Yes,
So
I will
yeah.
invite now Mr. Sims, Dr. and Mrs. Vaughan, and Dr. Peter Jones. Mr. Shard, if you can invite them into the meeting, please.
Yes, Chair. Mr. Sims and Dr. Jones have been brought into the room.
Thank you. Your question, please, Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask of Mr. Sims, in regard to his submission, what he would consider acceptable conditions to be to rectify the issues that he's concerned about.
Well, evening committee, nice to see you all again. So the main issue on this site really is the noise. We've kind of resigned to the visual impact of these units, and the applicant has made a significant effort with the colouring of the duct units. But it is the noise is the main issue that we have. There is a constant noise during the day when the units are running, even in winter time. So that's not when they're running under full load. It is significantly noisier during the summer when obviously the insides of the buildings are warmer. Now I know at last committee meeting I was asked, what sort of level of noise is this that we can constantly hear in our back gardens? And so since the last meeting, I've been popping into my garden occasionally and just trying to identify this. And it's sort of the equivalent of a large lorry driving up the road through the centre of Compton.
I think, Mr. Sims, I think we're aware of the situation. If you could just answer the question of Councillor Culver, she was one of, you may not be able to answer it, of what conditions might, I think it was, could rectify this problem.
Okay, so it's more conditions to control the noise. There's the conditions the committee put on. The noise levels for the other part of this site were very robust and we were very welcome, and we would like similar conditions put onto this site because it is unclear which part of this whole site the noise is coming from. In addition, we have had issues with increased noise from old air handler units. As they get older, they make more noise. We would like some maintenance conditions put on to the air handling units on this additional newer building.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. That's very useful. Any more questions, Councillor Corber?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask a question of Dr. Jones, if that's okay. I'd be interested to hear a bit more from him about the impact that it's had on him as a local resident.
Hi, Carolyn. Thanks for the question and thanks for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, my personal experience is that the noise, as Keith has basically said, from the whole site has kept me personally awake on an almost nightly basis now for many months. I've had to actually install a fan and buy a white noise machine so that I can actually drown out the noise to try to get sleep. Since the new air handling unit has started up early September, that new building is now occupied and fully operational. I find it actually difficult to completely drown out the noise anymore because it's just an additional source. So really, it's just complete like lack of sleep on an almost ongoing nightly basis has been the major impact, which is, yeah, beyond, I think beyond reasonable. I'm not even talking about actually spending any time outside now. This is actually inside my house. So I guess that's the main one, Carolyn.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Any more questions, Caroline Corber?
Just a final one, Chairman. Have you ever found, Dr. Jones, that you've actually had to leave your house in order to seek respite and get a decent night's sleep?
Yeah, yes, thanks for the reminder. Yeah, I've got to know a few local Airbnbs, which are actually, it's ironic because I would have thought I was in one of the most quiet locations you could find within an AONB on the edge of Compton, a very rural location, and I've instead found some peace and night's sleep in local B&Bs in different places, and going as often as I can. It's awful time because of lockdown, but like trying to visit my parents, for example, who live in Shropshire, and it's very quiet there, so I've done that on occasion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you for your questions, Councillor Corber. I can see no more questions being requested. So, Mr. Shard, if you very kindly invite Mr. Sims and Dr. Jones back to the room, please. Thank you. We now move on to any submission from supporters. We have no submissions this evening, but we do have one from the agent. Mrs. Legg.
Thank you, Chairman. Share my screen again. So this is from the agent, as you say. Jaimini Patel Design are the acting agents on behalf of Carbosynth Limited. We have prepared and submitted 2 planning applications in 2020 concerning units 10, 11, 12 and units 4, 5, 6 and 7, 8, 9. The content of the application drawing presents proposals to alter the existing industrial units in response to the client's brief. A significant aspect of the brief is driven by an immediate response to COVID-19 as critical supplies to combat COVID-19. We have continued to work closely with the client's team, including the projects manager, Fenton's, AFM, mechanical and electrical design and main contractor, and the primary suppliers for the cold stores and mechanical ductwork to ensure every opportunity is taken to reduce the visual and noise impact on site. The colour of the ductwork, moorland green, matches the existing ductwork of the other units provided by the planners. Upon submission of the application, we have continued to work closely with the designated planning agents and the associated officers to present, discuss and coordinate appropriate solutions, including remedial works to ensure the works are sensitive to the built environment and the surrounding context outside of Old Station Business Park industrial site, with consideration to the residential areas. During the planning process, extensive landscaping proposals have been approved and implemented on site, including the planting of 21 new trees and hedges, creating a landscaped screen along the western boundary of the site. With time to mature, the landscaping will create a thicker visual screen and acoustic barrier to the residential development to the west of the site. We have individually reviewed and responded to specific issues and developed agreeable solutions with the planning team. It is top priority the proposals ensure the safety of the staff and local community is maintained along with preserving the quality of the built environment. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this statement and to be part of this committee meeting. That's the end of the submission, Chairman.
Members, do you have any questions of clarification on the agent submission, please? I do. I'll just let them all come up. So I'm going to go with Councillor Abbs to start, if I may, please. Councillor Abbs, your question. Firstly, I will ask Mr. Shard to invite in Jamini Patel, who I understand is the agent.
Yeah, well, Ms. Patel is in the room with us.
Yes, thank you. Please go ahead then with your question, Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Miss Patel, could you mentioned there that you're expecting the vegetation to attenuate visual and audible sound. What is your estimate of the attenuation once it is fully grown?
Ms. Patel, you've got your microphone muted. If you'd just like to unmute, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
That's it. Now you're back with us. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Question, okay?
Yeah, I heard the question. Thank you. In terms of measuring the acoustic improvement, we would need to work alongside, well, with Amy and then also our acoustic consultant separately to take a measurement of that at regular intervals, giving the chance for the landscaping to first establish itself. Now that we're coming through the winter season, we're obviously going to see a lot less growth. However, we do suggest that through the condition, we urge to carry out another acoustic survey, giving time for the landscaping to establish and grow, and then take more accurate measurements of the impact of that. That's acoustically. Reverting back to the visual impact again.
It's about the acoustic attenuation. Thank you. If you could.
Okay, fine.
When you made this estimate and decided to plant these trees that are shown on the plan, you didn't have a number in mind that you were looking to achieve. You thought you'd plant some and guess the result. I'm lost a bit.
No, that's incorrect. We worked with the duty officer within the local authority and had the landscape plan. We designed it alongside the local authority, and we actually planted additional trees along the whole western boundary, as opposed to just trees remotely against the gable elevation to units 10, 11, 12. So we actually highlighted, between all parties highlighted that there are also visual gaps within the existing.
Yeah, I say it's a visual that I'm interested in here. It's an element. It's the noise that people are suffering from. So it's the noise attenuation that I'm trying to get to. So just I can ask the officer later, but just in your mind, was it a single row of trees you planted, or multiple rows of trees, or what?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, it is. I can confirm.
No, it wasn't a simple pluck out of the air decision. No.
Okay, I'll ask the officer later. Thank you.
Your questions, Councillor Abbs. I'll come on to Councillor Culver, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Ms. Patel, thank you for joining us this evening. Could you just say why you haven't mentioned the noise issue in any great detail in your submission? Do you not consider it to be important enough to address in your submission?
Of course, it's important to recognise that, and we actually prepared another submission on behalf of the client, but that's not been included within this committee meeting today. But
Okay.
There is a full record within the report of the 500 words that does clarify the further remedial works carried out concerning the acoustics and the visual impact of the landscaping.
And just a second question. Members of the public have raised concerns this evening about the maintenance of the equipment as it ages. Will you have a plan to ensure that you update the equipment and you monitor the sound that's made in case it gets louder as it ages?
Yes, correct. The client's already had the engineers out this week, and they have provided a plan that provides regular servicing and corrections if required. If there are any defects, then remedial works will be carried out. So there'll be constant maintenance of the air handling and all the mechanical works across units 10, 11, 12 and across the other units that belong to Carbosynth as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Colvin. Councillor Cant.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Patel. I just was quite interested in some understanding of the way in which you worked on the precise location of this equipment on the site in relation to the domestic dwellings nearby. Because there's been a lot of talk about the sort of noise that would output and whether that could be ameliorated, but I haven't heard much about, you know, whether it would have been possible to put them in any other position than where they are relatively adjacent to the site, or would that not have been possible?
Slightly new material, but I'll a short answer, please, Ms. Patel.
Yeah, yes, that would, the feasibility of the layouts of the mechanical and electrical work would have been investigated at the very early design stages at RIBA stage A feasibility, working with Claude Fenton's and also AFM and the client with the brief in mind. So they would have explored every single option possible before making that design decision to
with the clients or with the including the residents?
With the clients and the yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cant. Ms. Patel, thank you for joining us this evening. I've got no more questions from the members being sought, so I'll ask Mr. Shard to return you to the waiting room, please, where you can listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you for your attendance this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we now come on to our ward members' presentation, and I understand Councillor Culver would like to address us. Councillor Culver, you know the format, 5 minutes, and I'll give you some indication should you need it with a minute to go and 10 seconds just to conclude. When you're ready, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As you'll be aware, we discussed a lot of the issues with this at the last meeting that we had about concerns about noise, and they relate to both applications. I think it's a shame we haven't got the minutes of the previous meeting tonight, so we won't be able to refer to the specific conditions that we added last time and use those to cross-reference this evening with the conditions that we want to impose on this particular application. So just to mention that to start off with. As we've heard, there are concerns from members of the public. It concerns me that at least one of the local residents has had to leave his own house to go and stay somewhere else in order to get a decent night's sleep. I think that should be foremost at the of people's minds this evening, the impact that it is actually having on the local people. I'm not really convinced about the noise mitigation from the trees. Quite a few of those trees will be ones that lose their leaves in the winter time. So I'm not really sure what evidence there is for such trees to provide noise mitigation. So I'll be asking officers later about that. I think we also need to ensure that there are conditions whereby we have reassurance that if any residents have concerns about the noise, that planning enforcement will go out and they will do comprehensive noise assessments. And this needs to be done at different times of day. It needs to be done in the summer as well as the winter, because as it's been mentioned, the chiller units work at full tilt in the summertime, more so than in the winter time. So any noise monitoring needs to be done across a number of months to make sure that it gives us an accurate assessment of what the actual problems might be. And was I going to mention anything else? Yeah, I was just a little bit concerned. I know the noise assessments that were done on this in paragraph 5.18, it says that some assessments were done between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning. So I'm just a bit concerned about the kind of evidence that's been presented to us this evening and why those things have been done at such an unusual time of day. And this underscores my concern, should planning enforcement need to do more of these monitoring exercises in the future. They do need to be done at different times of day. We can't just send somebody out to do something at a very odd time of day, like 3 until 7 in the morning. It needs to be much more comprehensive than that. And I think myself and the local residents will be particularly concerned that that happens. And I'll leave it at that, Chairman. A lot of the concerns are similar to the ones I raised at the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Culver. Mr. Shepherd, Councillor Culver brings up a good point about the minutes regarding the conditions. Maybe you could do a little bit of homework in the meantime just to ensure that you're privy to what was discussed and agreed at the last meeting, so that we don't spend too much time trying to correlate a whole new list of conditions. Thank you. Members, we're now on to any questions you'd like to ask of Councillor Culver. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Vickers, well done.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I wasn't listening. I was thinking we were moving on to questions to officers already.
Anybody got any questions of Councillor Culver? No, I can see no hands raised. Thank you. Now we will, Councillor Vickers, move on to any questions of either Mr. Shepherd, Mr. Goddard, or at this stage I will invite you to ask any questions of Mrs. Smythe, should you have any on the environmental health issues. Thank you. So I'm just trying to find here, right, we've got plenty of hands up. Let's go with you first of all, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It is Anna Smythe I wanted to ask the question of. I've got personal experience of both as a property manager and with my wife and I having very different sensitivities to different noise frequencies, and the same goes for the residents of the properties that I manage. It's a very subjective area, and I'm wondering how unusual, bearing in mind that the noise tests show that we're within what's legally required, how unusual experience of Dr. Jones is, because it really is quite upsetting to think that a person has to leave their own home because noise is so bad that they can't get to sleep at night.
Thank you. So I would probably say at the moment we have probably about 6 or 7 current what would we call low frequency noise complaints. It's not that uncommon, and it's something, unfortunately, when you have a low frequency noise, that psychologically, as soon as you are tuned into it, that it's very difficult to escape it, and especially if it is something that's associated with equipment that is running, say, 24/7, there won't be that respite. So yeah, it's something that does happen, and you can have that within one household, that somebody's really affected by it and somebody who isn't.
Well, that's happened with me. I mean, I can't even hear the noises that my wife really finds terribly annoying, and vice versa with high frequency that I can hear and she can't. So
when we're
unusual.
When we are looking at statutory nuisance, we would be looking at the reasonable average person. In this instance, we've taken noise measurements, and the measurements are indicating a low frequency noise, which other neighbours and residents have heard and experienced as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Another question for Mrs. Smythe, if I may. On the acoustic report, page 23, it basically states that guidance for acceptable levels of noise in bedrooms is 30 decibels between 11 and 7 in the morning, and between 7 in the morning and 11 at night, 35 decibels. If I then turn to page 33, 63 hertz, 125 hertz, and 250 hertz, which is low frequency, are showing levels at the receiver of 33, 35, and 33. So actually, depending on 100 hertz, well, it's not far off 125. It's double the mains kind of hum type stuff. How come you're saying that this is acceptable when it clearly states in the acoustic report that it's over double during sleeping period what would be considered acceptable, and nearly quadruple the 125 hertz?
Sorry, I don't seem to have the same numbering. Could you just got a number at the bottom of the page? Page
23. This page here. I don't know how to show it to you anyway.
Yeah, I've got that report, but for some reason I've got
right here. It basically says 30 decibels between 7 and sleeping, daytime resting, bedroom location, 30 decibels. Page 23, and on page 33, it basically, same report, basically then goes on about, having measured it, what we see at the receivers, and it's double basically. Well, 3 decibels is a doubling of the perceived noise, so doubling, and well, it's a logarithmic scale, so approximately quadrupling. If I'm reading the numbers wrong, sorry, but that would say to me, why on earth are we approving something that's double? What's the guidance?
Okay. I can't match the numbers that you're referring to, I'm afraid, just from the reports I've got here, because I've got different page numbers, I'm afraid. But we would be looking, what we're looking at in terms of the condition and the levels that are set there is around the British Standard and the World Health Organization guidelines, and that's what we would be aiming and expecting them to achieve. And we, from what they're proposing as mitigation measures, the condition will require the mitigation measures to bring the noise levels down to that acceptable level and to the World Health Organization and British Standard levels.
Which are?
That's the 30 at night time, and I think we've set it actually as 27 externally. So therefore, with further distance into the property and some mitigation for windows, even if they're open, that would then bring the levels well below that within the property and what would be experienced by the residents.
May I ask a small supplementary, Chairman?
Yes, yes, Councillor.
Thank you. So as this is a retrospective application, and these are world standards, etc., and the acoustic report was done a year ago, at least 11th of December 2019. How are we're discussing mitigation now for something that's already been built, been causing problem for a minimum of a year according to this report, and so that's a year of causing people harm? It's quite appalling. Sorry, it's a statement rather than a question, but why again are we looking, as it's retrospective, at only doing this now?
From the assessment from Environmental Health, we've been consulted on this, and I'm looking then at what their proposals are. So from our perspective, they're proposing mitigation measures. We would look at those and think, are they reasonable to do under the planning terms and what we've got in the process here. We are also looking at this from a nuisance investigation, and I know there have been contacts from my colleagues over the last few years to do with this site, and they've been addressed in piecemeal. But the measurements I've taken have been within the property, and I would say that the average levels that I've got in the time periods when measurements are taken is that these World Health Organization and British standards are actually being met, but that's only, as Councillor Culver referred to earlier, a snapshot in time of when I've taken those measurements. But there is definitely something around the low frequency, but of course we have got the other application site and this application site and a numerous number of noise sources. So I feel from what we've had in front of us in terms of from what the applicant has put there with the noise report and the evidence from visits that I've made, that a reasonable condition to impose on this site, an achievable condition, would be those alongside the World Health Organization and British standards, which are the ones that have been proposed.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Pye.
Three questions. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just a question about the mitigation provided by the tree planting. What evidence do we have that the number of trees that have been put in will provide mitigation for the noise levels that have been experienced?
Personally, I've not considered them within the mitigation, and I would be looking more at barriers, solid barriers, and also the height at which the noise sources are on the site, because if some of those exhausts on this application and the other application are at rooftop roof height, trees are not going to give that any benefit to those, so I would not be considering them in any of the calculations I would look at to provide any benefit.
Chairman, if I can just supplement Mrs. Smythe's response there, it is typical within planning when looking at noise mitigation not to consider trees and vegetation as having a significant mitigating effect. So from a planning point of view, that would typically be the approach that Mrs. Smythe has just outlined, that we would be looking at as well.
Thank you for that, Mr. Till. Did you have anything else to add, Mrs. Smythe?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Corver, did you have another question?
No, that's fine, Chairman. Thank you.
Can I move now on to Councillor Wollaston, please?
Thank you, Chairman. It seems to me that even the applicants are, the objectors are admitting that the applicants are trying to be as helpful as they can. I just wonder whether Mrs. Smythe might be able to indicate from her experience whether there's any better way of dealing with this problem. For example, could the exhaust, whatever you want to call it, be moved to a lower level?
If barriers were imposed or the fencing, say, around it, then at a lower level, then there would be some benefit. You'd have very close barrier up to close to the source. I would say probably that from the proposals they've got there, the mitigation would be in line with what I've seen on other sites around air handling units. I have been talking to their acoustic consultant, really, who is looking at all options, but I said, having identified a particular frequency, that will be easier for the site now to try and focus most of the work on reducing that particular aspect of the noise rather than the general site noise.
Chair, may I ask supplementary?
Indeed.
Thank you. So can I understand, is the noise coming out of the top of the flue, or is it, or what?
I'm on the unit, on the air handling units, you've got the reverberation and the sound coming from the air flowing through the, I think as Matthew showed on the photo, the ducting work. You'll get some noise and vibration coming from that as the air flows through it. And then you've got the exhaustion point where the air is then flowing out. So you've got a number of different noise sources associated with those kind of air handling units. So it might be, which is I think they're proposing mitigation will be attacking was a terrible word, but dealing with it from all angles, because what you don't want to be doing is if you slow down a fan, you may create more reverberation noise, and if you speed up the fan might itself become noisier and you'll get more of a jet noise than a warbling noise. So it's a fine balance, and it does need that technical support that they're getting from their acoustic consultants.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go on to Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, I think Councillor Wollaston covered what I was going to ask. I think.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, thank you. It's really following on from Councillor Abb's question, but based on my own experience of being an applicant for a site which had similar problems, it wasn't retrospective, and this, I'm wondering, it really is a question to Mr. Till, is this significant, that the fact that that we're in this situation? Because in my experience, you have a building with materials and equipment installed which has already been assessed as meeting the noise requirements of the law. But you then, before you can hand it over and occupy it, have building regs check that it is actually performing the way that the planning permission said it would. Now, in this situation, because the building was already erected and, you know, we're in a retrospective situation, we didn't have the building regs situation arise, where building regs might have basically refused it, and then the action would have had to been taken before it comes into operation. Are we in a different situation now? Is this explaining why we are having this discussion tonight?
I think, Mr. Till, I think I can answer this if that's okay. I think that's okay with Councillor Vickers as well.
Yeah, because I wasn't at the last meeting and I haven't seen the minutes, so I'm not aware of previous discussions at the last meeting.
So as you said, the previous applications for the site, when we approved the building in its entirety, had a condition attached to it that we'd have the details, no plant to be installed until details were submitted to and approved to the council, to the local authority. So I'm referring to point 5.2 within the report. So there was, when the council approved the building, there was an extra step for the applicants to go through to submit further details to us to approve, and obviously have the eye for environmental health and the impact that would have. Obviously, I'm unsure of the timeline, but that has happened retrospectively, so they haven't sought to discharge that condition. This is how this application has come about, that then our enforcement officers have become involved due to the complaints. We've resolved that there's been a non-compliance with this condition, hence the need for this application to come in with the full details of that plant machinery. So it's retrospective in that sense. We've tried to control it before, but obviously things have developed on site without the local authority giving written approval, and this is the result, and we're considering that within this application. So that's how I think that's how it sits within those contexts. Is that an acceptable answer?
Thank you. I didn't see that in the report. I understand. So it wasn't retrospective at the last meeting. It's just that it's failed a condition of the application that was approved last time, and that's why it's had to come back to committee. Yeah.
So it failed to comply with a condition from 2017, so not from the last committee on that side. So they've installed it, and now we're trying to rectify that situation with this application.
I see. Thank you.
Can I just supplement that with something of an informational as well regarding retrospective applications for planning permission? The principal planning legislation doesn't make any significant distinction between a planning application for works that haven't been carried out and a planning application for works that have been carried out in terms of the relevant considerations. On top of that, just to clarify, building regulations check compliance with the building regulations. They don't check compliance these days, and haven't done for many years, with planning permissions. We don't operate hand in hand in that manner, and a breach of the building regulations and a breach of planning control can be very different things. So the things to consider under this application are, is it possible to achieve sufficient acoustic mitigation now that the works have been carried out in terms of what's been installed and what's being proposed as far as acoustic mitigation is concerned. And you're already aware your officer's recommendation on this is that it is.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Members, I've got no more questions of the officers. We've heard the presentations from the officers, we've heard the presentations from the public, and we've had opportunity to ask our questions of both. So we now open it up to the debate, and I'm looking who would like to start the debate. I have Councillor Abbs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I did actually I raised my hand to ask one more question of the officers, but it's not an important point. It's related to this retrospective situation again, and I'm just curious how often we refuse, which is why I was going to ask officers retrospective applications. I've not been doing these for that many years, but we seem to have looked at a lot. So that saddened me. The mitigation that we're currently looking at, I'm very nervous given the responses from the applicant that they will achieve the stated aims, and we seem to be internally aiming at for the world standard to just meet the standard, which is a terrible, leaves us with a terrible chance of actually missing what's required. And 3 dB can make a whole bunch of difference, because I say it halves the sound. So if I could find reasons to refuse this while they sort the situation, I would do, to be honest, because I don't like retrospective in this way. And it's been not just a year, but it looks like several years of making noise and people not getting sleep. But we're not allowed to kind of be punish people. So in the whole, I would normally have approved this with the right kind of sound, right kind of soundscape in place. So it's only really a matter in the future of the applicant coming forward with the relevant applications. So I'm inclined to approve it, but I will be asking for some additional mitigation over and above what we did last time on the last application.
Thank you, Councillor Alves. Councillor Cant.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose, yeah, I tend to agree with elements of what Councillor Alves has just said, in the sense that it does appear, looking at paragraph 518, there's another unit on the site which isn't part of this retrospective application, has significantly exceeded the sound levels that the officers have said would be acceptable. That in itself concerns me, because if one unit on the site's already doing this, there's nothing to say that future development or change of occupant of the site won't cause that situation to recur on other units already on the site. So I'm quite concerned about that. I'm also, very concerned that we, as this is retrospective, I'm very concerned that the applicant didn't see fit to reflect on the inconvenience to local residents before installing the machinery in the place it was installed on site. So that just doesn't make me terribly happy. It seems a fairly arbitrary way of looking at things. We'll do things first to suit us, and the local community can suck it up until we have to put in a retrospective application. And I also wonder whether, going back to Councillor Ham's position, is whether we might insist on a condition that says that a failure to enforce within a prescribed amount of time will automatically result in enforcement action being initiated by officers, rather than wait for the whole thing to go around in a circle and potentially come back to us with a request that we enforce at some long distant time in the future.
Councillor Cant, maybe we can take some advice after the debate as well, what we can and can't do in terms of conditions. Do I have anybody else for the debate? It's gone very quiet. Would you like to put your hand up? Come along, members. We need to make a decision on this. We need to debate this. I'm looking then for a proposer and a second. Councillor Bennyworth, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In agreement with my two precedents, I think if we cross-reference the minutes which we don't have sight of this evening, we lay down some pretty robust mitigation and conditions to the application at the last meeting for another application. I think, yeah, if we can put in some very well placed conditions to this, acoustic fencing being one of them, and enforcement's key. Enforcement on this is absolutely vital.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's always disappointing to have to determine retrospective applications, because it gives us very, very little room for manoeuvre, because we are having to determine something that is already in situ. I agree with everyone else's comments about the need to make sure that this site is acoustically, that are good, strong acoustic barriers around it, because noise is a real disturbance for people. Having said that, I can't think that we have got any real strong case to refuse this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Wollaston.
I'd like to propose, Chairman, but on the basis we find some very tough conditions.
Do I have a second?
I will second, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. I think we now need to be a little bit more specific and with regards to our conditions before we take this to the vote. We've had one suggestion of acoustic fencing. We've had no suggestion as to what the acoustic levels we're aiming to achieve. So our conditions have got to be something that's achievable. Mr. Shepherd, can you help us? How far can we go?
So I'll refer to...
Keeping in mind what we put in place for the last application. I think these two ought to run hand in hand.
Absolutely, thank you, Chairman. I think if I direct councillors to page 17 and condition number 5 or the update sheet where it's been updated. The last application we dealt with, one of the conditions was that we have a submission of a schedule of works to mitigate them, i.e. have those acoustic fences. On this application, we benefit from having those proposed measures already submitted to us within the noise report. So if I refer you to 5.2 of the noise impact assessment, which is page 25, that lists the mitigation that we can, that the applicant has proposed to install. One of those being a screen formed, also the extract fans working at different percentages during duty and when they're not, when the business is not operating. That's been recommended by their noise impact assessment. So we already have that schedule of works. We know what they need to do. They need to install those. We're asking them to install them within 1 month and then test and ensure that those stick to the levels that have been recommended within that condition. If, for instance, the machinery were to degrade over time, it wouldn't then meet those noise levels. So we have a guarantee there of maintenance in terms of if they do go outside or if they're unmaintained, they break out on the noise higher than what is required in the conditions. Obviously, the maintenance has to come in and has to change those and has to bring those levels back down. We also have condition 6, which is the timer system, which will reduce the impact overnight, switching those off. So we've got quite a robust set pair of conditions there. We've also got restrictive conditions further down. So condition number 7, restricting external lighting, and number 8 in terms of no additional extractor units. So again, we're restricting them from being able to install anything further, so we avoid this whole retrospective situation. In terms of the comparison to the previous application and the minutes that I've got up here, it's what we required last time was the scheme of works. We have that scheme of works now. We just need to ensure that they install that within 1 month. We had the timing controls for the last applications, so we've got those on this application. We feel, and Environment Health feel, that the conditions are sufficiently robust and they're specific to the noise levels that need to be achieved. So if councillors would like to propose more specific wording or go from the previous wording on there, but I hope my explanation shows that we've tried to go hand in hand with what we've already approved on the other site on the previous meeting, and take that to the next level on this one for more specific to this building as well. And of course, as the chairman has said, these applications will run concurrently. So the site will be monitored by the adjacent parish council, the adjacent neighbours as well. We've statutory noise nuisance and impact to the neighbouring amenity is obviously quite high up in the priority. It's tangible in terms of its impact, so it becomes quite a forefront to enforcement, and we've seen that with these applications coming to fruition as well. So I think the applicants have tried to work with us through conditions, and the site is improving and the noise levels are improving. We've got to push that to the next level, and we can condition that within the reports as recommended here in the agenda and within the update sheet. So unless there's specific wording, I think our officer's advice is that we've tried to be as stringent as possible with our conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. I've got 3 members with questions. I think it was Councillor Abb said, is there anything we can do in the conditions of putting a time limit on achieving the noise levels? I think we've got a time limit of maybe erecting different things, but the fact you put up an acoustic fence might not be that it's addressing the actual irritating decibel or frequency.
So we've got within condition 5 that the mitigation measures identified within the noise impact assessment shall be installed within 1 month of this permission, and thereafter retained and monitored. And they shall not exceed, measured at the eastern boundary, the plant noise of the residential properties. So specifically there, we've got a trigger for them to install these, and we've got a trigger there to monitor these and to ensure that they are. We've got a specific spot that we can go to and say, is it correct? Is it as you've said? Also with the timer system, we've said within 2 months that they need to install that as well. We can change around with those. I think a month is reasonable for the noise mitigation, and 2 months is reasonable for the timer system. So,
I'm going to ask the members now. They have 3 questions maybe to contribute towards the conditions. I'll start with Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, condition 5, we're using the well, in the paperwork I'm looking at, we're using the number 36 decibels between 7 and 7.
Yeah.
Is that still okay? On page 23 of the acoustic report, it specifies that the limit should be 35. So I'd prefer that we change 36 to 33 to give us some margin of error. And certainly change the wording so that it applies to noise arriving from the site as a whole, of which this particular application might contribute, but obviously the other application from 2 weeks ago will have also be contributing. I don't know if that's possible.
I think in terms of the noise level, unless my colleague Ms. Smythe has any strong objection, then that certainly can be adjusted. In terms of, we have to look at the applications individually. So we're looking very much at the red line and this unit. It will obviously play into the factor with the other side as well. But I think we have to be cautious not to start conditioning reliance on other areas or other areas of development sites. That so I'd advise councillors against that section, but certainly unless our environmental health colleagues have any issue, and I think dropping the level would give a margin for error.
Mr. Smythe, can you advise us whether that's achievable, please? We're not setting up a level that can't be achieved.
No, as I think I explained at the last committee, this is a sort of definitive level in line with the guidance rather than comparative. So the concern would be more the other way, that if there's a particularly low background level, they could be complying with these target levels, and it could still be perhaps audible in gardens and things. But dropping it should be well, they may need to take some extra steps, but it would be reasonable.
Can I just clarify that was 33, wasn't it? That's right.
Yeah, but each 3 decibels halves the sound. Is that correct, Mrs. Smythe?
Yeah, 3 decibels, yes.
Yeah, so each 3, so we halve the sound by just dropping from 36 to 33.
Councillor Camp.
Thank you, Chair. I really coming back to the issue that I think I raised earlier, that in light of the fact this is retrospective and the local residents have already had to put up with considerable personal inconvenience due to the fact these people have acted without seeking consent in advance and are now only acting retrospectively, I would like to see us be tougher on this and put a further sentence, if possible, into the condition 5, which says that should the organisation fail to implement the noise mitigation measures within 28 days, enforcement action will automatically be triggered by officers.
I think we take that view regardless of whether it was included within the condition that they
I think it should be, because I think we need to send a clear message out. It's not, this is not a normal application where we're saying, you've applied in advance, you're about to do the work, here are the conditions, and this is the timescale. Thank you very much. They've not done that. They've gone ahead with, I'm all in favour of development that generates jobs. However, they've gone ahead and done what they felt like doing. Local residents have suffered significantly for a period of time. I now think we need to send a message out to anyone who wants to do things like this. This is not going to be acceptable to us. Should you do this and go ahead and apply retrospectively, we will impose some really tough follow-up on it. The follow-up,
Councillor Camp, if I can answer that, it is not possible to stipulate through a condition that is active on an applicant that the council will take enforcement action. the council officers will note that councillors consider it important that this condition is followed through and that enforcement action is taken expediently if the condition isn't followed through. But making a requirement of condition contingent on actions to be taken by the council simply wouldn't be enforceable or reasonable in accordance with the tests specified in the MPPF.
Thank you.
Well, presumably, if the condition is reasonable, I mean, you can minute it if you like, but I'm concerned that sometimes under pressure, and we know you're all under pressure in the planning department, officers can be slower than we would perhaps like to enforce things. In this case, I just want to be sure that it's fully on record that enforcement action will be swift and just if the condition is failed to comply, they fail to comply with the condition. That's what I'm just pointing out.
I'm trying to concentrate, if we can, on securing the conditions for this application. Councillor Culver, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. There's an almighty firework display going on in the background, ironically, considering we're talking about noise. So my apologies if you hear it.
You're okay. It's not too much of a disruption.
Yes, we've just said that we'll put 33 decibels as a condition, but I think on the last one we put 36. So are we able to go back to the previous application and put 33 on that as well, bearing in mind we've already given it approval?
I'm afraid we can't. We've already been given, it's already been given approval and the decision notice has already been sent
Okay.
out.
So that will be an inconsistency across the two applications then.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Chairman, I've got some others, apologies. I think we put a condition on the last one about having a noise attenuating fence. We saw some photographs earlier where there was a fence made from, it looked like it was made from pallet boxes. And I think we made a more specific condition last time that would be a more sturdy fence. I think Councillor Barnett said we should do one like they've got along the M4 where it's actual like close board. I don't know if that's possible.
That's something that's been suggested within their mitigation is this attenuation barrier. I think it'll be a case of when the applicant comes in to discharge those to notify us of what's happening. That'll be what they try and seek to have a strong barrier around that area. So it'll be the case that'll be something that's delivered through the mitigation, and it's certainly something that's already proposed within the recommended mitigation. In comparison to the previous application, it was a suggested and requirement of the condition that might be one of the ways of the schedule works. As I said earlier, we've already got that kind of schedule, that idea of what they're going to put in as mitigation. So it'll be a case of they'll take these comments on board as part of this, and that'll be what they'll deliver through the mitigation that's been proposed in the noise impact assessment.
And are we able to add any conditions about weekends or public holidays? Could we say that they need to turn kit off then or turn the sound levels down? I
think in terms of the nature of the business as well, that the operation would be minimised at those times on weekends, in my understanding, and especially on bank holidays. I think it would be perhaps overly onerous on the applicant. And also it might be something that's already included within that kind of 20% overnight. It might be that they choose to operate in that way when they're not fully, they haven't got staffing, etc. on those kind of those situations.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up on Councillor Cant's point and ask Mr. Shepherd if he could confirm that what might satisfy concerns expressed is an informative which is included within the decision notice but not as part of the condition, or just something in the minutes. Doesn't seem quite strong.
So I think it's following on from what Mr. Till said, that the expression has been very strong within this meeting, has been recorded within the minutes as well. Officers would be very aware. Environmental health are aware in terms of their statutory noise instruments as well. So I think I'd avoid, I'd defer to Mr. Till if an informative would be appropriate, but my response as an officer, I think we've got it recorded here. I think we know the feeling. I think we also share kind of that frustration as well with to deal with these kind of situations as well. So I think enforcement action would be forthcoming quite quickly.
Thank you. And the final one I'm going to take is Councillor Abbs. Thank you.
Thanks again, Chair. It was just to further strengthen 5 in that the acoustic report and Mrs. Smy's own results show low frequency. So can we make sure that this decibel number is not an average number that they end up taking, because that's down as 27 already, but all the issues are around 0 to 500 hertz. I think 100 hertz was mentioned earlier. So if we put to say that the 33 should be, it should be less than 33 across the whole range, but more specifically across the 0 to 500 hertz range. Just to avoid them getting out of it by taking an average across all frequencies and going, oh yes, on average we're less than 33, but actually the ones of interest were still above it.
Mr. Shepherd, are you happy with this suggestion?
I think the condition as I read it is the plant noise emissions shall not exceed when measured at the eastern boundary of the residential properties of U2 stables will be 33 decibels between 7 and 9. So we would not be under the impression that it would be an average. We would be looking at them to adhere to that level throughout that time period, and that is not the case that there's a get out within that.
There was just for avoidance of all doubt overall.
Yeah, no, I can understand that, but I think it's the wording would be sufficiently clear. Anna, do you?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I was trying to put my hand up on this one. Waving. No, that is set as an average level. So if we wanted to, I think the parish council's submission did suggest an international standard, the ISO standard on low frequency noise. So I think we'd have to put in something very specific extra line on that one to include from 125 hertz and below. And I would put that to cover that spectrum rather than the 100 hertz, which I've identified, because I don't believe that that's particularly from this piece of kit. So that 125 hertz and below. So I can come up with some suitable wording to add to, you've got to meet this average level regardless, and in addition at low frequency levels meet this requirement, if that would be suitable.
I'd be very happy that was Smythe, but could we just make it, because their own report shows 33 decibels at 250 hertz, and obviously so it's down at 22 decibels at 500, so that's fine. So by covering 0 to 500 hertz, we cover all the danger spots, just in case when you were measuring, you didn't pick up those other frequencies when you happened to be there. Just trying to cover all the bases, really. So.
Yep. Members, I have a proposer of Councillor Wollaston and a second of Councillor Cole. And before I put this to the vote, I mean, we've discussed this extensively, and we've added, I'm pleased to say, considerable conditions to safeguard the situation of the residents of Compton. But I will ask Mr. Shepherd and Mrs. Armour, are we quite happy that we've captured all those conditions and you're happy that they've been drafted as such and will be included in the conditions of this application before I put it to the vote? Mr. Shepherd.
Ms. Smythe, can you just confirm that you have enough to be able to propose to suggest a condition that we can put forward in the decision notice tomorrow? Have you got enough information and enough wording there?
Yes, we'll be looking at following the international standard, but covering it from 500 hertz and below, as Councillor Abbs has detailed.
Okay, excellent. If Ms. Smythe is happy, then I'm content as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Armour, you're happy?
Yes, if the planning officer is happy.
Therefore, the recommendation is for the head of planning and countryside be authorised to grant the planning permission at application number 20/01226. This is the full planning application at the old station Business Park at Compton. So I will ask Mrs. Armour to please carry out the name vote.
Okay, so this is for permission. Councillor Abbs.
Or with mitigation measures.
Okay, Councillor Barnett.
For.
Councillor Bennyworth.
For.
Councillor Cant.
For with the mitigation measures and the reference to enforcement somewhere in the minutes.
Councillor Cole.
For.
Councillor Culver.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Wollaston.
For.
Councillor Hooker.
For.
So that's unanimous then for permission.
Thank you, Mrs. Armour. Therefore, this application is approved. Members, we've been discussing this for over an hour. We've been on the committee meeting now for an hour and a half. I would suggest maybe a 5-minute comfort break. And if we could return maybe 1-2 minutes past 8 o'clock, I'll resume the meeting then. Mr. Shard, if you could please put up the notice that we are taking a break. Thank you very much.
You know, Chairman.
I'm ready. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. And we move on now to our second application this evening, which is application number 20/00761. This is the full planning application at the Vine Cottage at Courage. And this has come to committee this evening due to the member call-in and 7 letters of objection. This application this evening will be presented by Mrs. Cutts. Mrs. Cutts, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I will just start to share my screen with you just to check. There we go. Have you got? Are you seeing the correct? You should have the front page of the presentation. Are you seeing that?
I do. Thank you, Mrs. Cutts. Yes, I do.
Great. Thank you. Bear with me a moment. I didn't quite have it right. Let's try that again. Right. Do you have that correct now?
I've got the slide view. I've not got the actual individual slide view. I've got the whole presentation view.
Oh.
Well, with the notes on the side.
It's not the right one. Hang on, sorry. Is that the correct one now?
No, I'm showing the main one and the next slide. And I'm showing the, yeah, we're just getting 2 slides up at a time.
Okay, no, that's not right.
Is it a case of just changing the display settings at the top?
Oh, okay. There we go. Have you got that now? You should have one saying east side elevation from the previous application.
Yeah, I've got 2 slides again. I've got the next slide as well come up.
Okay.
I think there's a little screen down the bottom. I don't know what happens if you put the on the notation at the bottom. Does that bring the whole screen up? You've got half screen underneath the slide.
Oh, okay.
And we're also looking at not Vine Cottage. We're looking at
there we go. Right, we've got to Vine Cottage. Okay. Can you see location and block plan now, even if you've got the note?
Previous application at Compton.
Oh, okay, I'm on the wrong screen. Okay, hang on. Stop share. I shall start again. Right. Do you have location and block plan now?
I do. Members, are we happy to proceed with that size plan? It's not as we would normally look at it, because we're looking also at the pond and soakaway details. I feel that we need to see the whole drawing on this one.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying.
John, if you're having difficulties, I have my system set up and ready to go if you'd like me to take over running the...
Yeah, if you could. I don't know what I've done. I'm not picking up the right screen to share. So yeah, it's slide 10 you should be at.
Right, now. Thank you. You're off now, Mr.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Apologies there. This application is proposing the creation of an ecological pond, bund soakaways and a soft landscaping scheme on land adjacent to Vine Cottage in Courage. On the screen, you will see under the location plan drawing in the left-hand corner, the reddy orangey colour, which is outlining the site, and then you will see the two hatched areas, which are the proposed bunds, and then the pond will go inside that. I don't know if Simon is able to go down to slide 10, which also shows the pond as well. That's in the landscape plan. The site is within the open countryside, outside of any settlement boundary, and is within the North Wessex Down area of outstanding natural beauty. The land was previously used for sand extraction and has now been restored to agricultural use. There is a group of 5 dwellings to the north in Oaklands, and Foxford House and Galini Cottage to the east, and these are separated from the site by a public right-of-way. Members will be aware, there we go, here this shows, you can see Oaklands just to the north, and then Foxford House and Galini Cottage to the east. The dark lines will show you where the location of the pond is, and the 2 parallel blue blocks are where the soakaways are proposed to be sited. Members will be aware that a similar application was refused planning permission in January 2020 due to concerns about the flood risk of the proposal. Some of the bunds are already on the site, but it is proposed to extend and to reprofile those bunds. They are approximately 1.5 metres in height. However, the level of the water will be at ground level, as you can see from this longitudinal section. That's Vine Cottage there, the house that you can see. And you can see the blue level is the varying depth of the pond at ground level, and then you can see the sections that are the height of the bunds on that. The bunds are to be formed from waste spoil within the site, as I have referred to in the update sheet. These will be lined with a geotextile layer, sand, and a geomembrane. There will then be an overflow pipe which has a silt trap on it, which connects to the soakaways to the east. The originally submitted plan included additional tree planting near the soakaways, and as indicated on the update sheet, these trees were removed during the course of the application due to concerns about roots affecting the efficiency of the soakaway. The soakaways have 4 observation wells, and they will be planted over with a meadow seed mix. In addition to the reprofiling of the bunds, they will also be planted with a wild seed mix, and additional aquatic planting is proposed around the edges of the pond. Again, on this plan, that is shown as the very light blue around the edges of the pond. So it's a wild seed mix on the pond, aquatic planting around the edges of the pond, and then a native mixed hedge is proposed to be planted between the northern edge of the bunds and the boundary with Courage Road, where you might be able to make out just a little bit of green on the slide that is showing to you now. The large pink circles on this plan are the root protection zones around the existing trees on the site, which will be retained. Ecological enhancements to the bunds are also proposed in the form of a bee post, which is about 1 metre in height, and 2 reptile refuges to be created on the sides of the bunds to make little houses for reptiles. In terms of the consultations, Cheveley Parish Council have objected to the proposal, and as you will see from the update sheet, they have confirmed that they maintain their objection to the proposal. In their objection, they have questioned the maintenance of the soakaways and recommend the use of stringent conditions to deal with this. As you can see, this is the track which provides the access to the site. The soakaways are to be located, as you look at this picture, just to the left. I think there are some other photos as well, as if you go down, Simon, that show the rest of the site. This is a view across the site where the pond would be sited. The view within the site. This is a similar view, but at a different time of year, where you can see there is some water. This is looking across the bunds towards Vine Cottage in the location where there would be the additional native hedge planting. Again, this shows it more with winter with less cover than the previous view. And this is another view across. These bunds are proposed to be reduced in the profile from 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 and lowered. During the course of the application, the drainage engineer required alterations to the plans due to the impact of planting. Following the submission of, oh, sorry, I've jumped a bit, sorry. I did also want to just go through the representations that were received from the contributors as well. These are outlined in the officer report, but the main summary of the objections raised were about the need for the pond, the concerns about the future flood risk, and maintenance of the ponds in the future, the effect on groundwater levels, as there was historic groundwater flooding to nearby properties to the east during the flood events that you'll remember of 2007. There was also concerns raised about the monitoring of construction and ongoing maintenance of the pond, the bunds and the soakaway, and historic reduction in vegetation across the site, which has led to the increased surface runoff. And there are also concerns about the appearance of the development within the AONB. In terms of the other consultation responses, there's been no objection from the highways officer with regards to highway safety. A construction method statement and parking conditions during construction have been considered to be appropriate. The tree officer and ecology officer have not raised any objections following the amendments, and the amendments to the landscaping scheme have been extensively discussed, as well as the ecological enhancements with the aquatic planting and the bee and reptile refuges. The drainage officer has also been consulted on the application. The amendments were made to remove the orchard planting that had been proposed. So no new additional trees are proposed on the site, just the native hedging along the frontage. He's satisfied with the landscaping that's proposed. During the course of the application, he also raised concerns about bund stability calculations, additional manholes, the maintenance of the grill on the overflow pipe, and required confirmation about the width of the crest on the bunds to maintain safe access for checking the outflow pipe to the soakaway. These outstanding matters can be dealt with through pre-commencement conditions, which have been outlined on the update sheet. The main considerations in determining this application are the impact on the character and appearance of the area, flooding, highway safety and ecology. As outlined in the officer report, the site is within the North Wessex Downs AONB and is on agricultural land. Given its previous use for gravel extraction, the site is of poor quality. It also forms part of a transitional area between the open fields to the east and the more wooded area of Snellsmore Common to the west. There have been significant improvements to this proposal since the previously submitted scheme, which was refused. This has included more details about the reprofiling of the bunds, improved planting and landscaping details, as well as further ecological enhancements. It is considered that the presence of ponds in the countryside is not an unusual feature, and the improvements which are now proposed will help the proposal to sit comfortably within the landscape and within this transitional area between the open fields and the wooded area, and is not considered on balance to be harmful to the character and appearance of the ONB. Moving on to the flooding issues, the site is within flood zone 1, so it's not at risk from flooding from rivers, and is not in an area at risk of groundwater or surface water flooding, and is not in a critical drainage area. The water for the pond will be collected from runoff from the higher land to the west. The application details have been assessed by your drainage engineers, and whilst no objection has been raised, and there are concerns which are outstanding with regards to additional information which is required with regards to ongoing maintenance, bund stability calculations and prevention of erosion to the bunds. And this is reiterated by the concerns of residents and chiefly Parish Council. There are additional conditions which have been suggested on the update sheet which can resolve these outstanding matters to ensure that we're satisfied with the quality of the development and ongoing maintenance and monitoring during construction works. We've also added a condition which requires a supervisor watching brief so that the works are overseen by either a geotechnical engineer or a panel engineer, and these are the suitably qualified professionals that are able to supervise the works, and then it will be the developer's responsibility to ensure these works are suitably monitored. The conditions also refer to the requirement for an ongoing maintenance plan to prevent blockages of the outflow pipe in the future. And we are satisfied that with these conditions, the pond will not increase the flood risk as a result of the development. The Highways Officer has not raised any objections to the proposal, and conditions with regards to wheel washing and parking of contractor vehicles are also suggested. The ecologist assessed the application and is satisfied with the ecological enhancements which have been proposed. On balance, the proposal is considered to be acceptable, and you'll note on the update sheet that the recommendation has been amended due to the introduction of pre-commencement conditions. It's a requirement that a developer agrees pre-commencement conditions before a permission is granted, and as these were added to the update sheet, there has not been an opportunity for the developer to give that approval to the wording of the pre-commencement conditions, and therefore the recommendation has been changed. So the recommendation now is to delegate to the head of development and planning to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed in the agenda report and the additional conditions listed below, provided that pre-commencement conditions have been agreed by the developer by the 4th of December, or such longer period that may be authorised by the head of development planning in consultation with the chairman or vice chairman of the Western Area Planning Committee, to delegate to the head of development and planning to grant planning permission subject to the conditions in the update sheet and the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Cutts. Members, I've asked our drainage engineer, Mr. Clark, to join us this evening. I'm just looking if I can see him. As you will see, we don't have visual. The video is not going, but we certainly do have him on our microphones. And Mr. Clark, would you like to address us really on your considerations of the new bund design and the maintenance issues and any other issues with regard to flooding?
Okay, well, as far as the stability of the bund is concerned, we have an assurance from a panel engineer that this bund will be stable, but we can't accept the assurance of one particular professional. We need evidence to back up that claim, which is why I've asked for their slope stability calculations before this development goes ahead. The other point of concern was about the spillway. Now, the spillway is when this reservoir fills up. If there's an exceptionally severe storm, and this pond fills and fills and fills until it starts overtopping. Now, in those circumstances, there is a risk that the downstream slope, the downstream side of the embankment, will start to wash out and erode, and therefore undermine the stability of it. So with normal reservoir design, you reinforce that spillway. So that downstream slope needs to be reinforced. And I would like to see what the developer's proposals are to identify where the water will overtop and how that bank will be reinforced to prevent erosion. Now, the third point was maintenance. Now, at the previous meeting, you may recall that I questioned how the outlet pipe, the pipe that leads from the reservoir into the soakaway, was going to be maintained if it were blocked with leaves. How would you get access to it to clear those leaves? Now, my assumption was that they were going to provide a walkway along the top of the bund to allow somebody to walk along it and then be able to rake out any leaves and debris that were blocking the pipe. But what we've still got is a sort of a barrel-shaped top on this the crest of the reservoir, which makes it would make it, in my opinion, dangerous to walk along. So I want to see the developer's proposals for maintaining this reservoir safely. Now, it may be that his proposal is to unblock the outlet by accessing it from the manhole downstream and rodding up. Not my preferred method, but the fact is I need him to demonstrate to me that this reservoir can be maintained safely. That's the summary. As far as landscaping is concerned, we did have concern about the location of trees and route ingress into the soakaways, into the bund itself, but those points have all been addressed, so there's no concern with the landscaping.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I think you're going to get a few questions of clarification at the end.
Yes, sure.
Mr. Goddard, there were some highway issues. You had no objection. I presume you've nothing to add.
Chairman, no, the bunds are already there, so it's not a question of lots of spoil being taken to the site. As long as Mr. Clark's happy that there's no threat to the public highway nearby, I'm also content, Chairman. Thank you.
Members, we move on now to our clerk, Mrs. Legg, and I will ask her to read out the submissions. We've got nothing from the Parish Council, but we do have one from the objectors. So, Mrs. Legg, could you please read out the submission from the objectors?
Thank you, Chairman. Just sharing the screen for you now. So this is the submission from the objectors. On behalf of the neighbouring residents to the application, we maintain that the deforestation east of the Fine Cottage building itself has led to the water runoff onto Courage Road near the northeast corner of the proposed pond. We would like to remind the Planning Committee that this is the third application for the pond. The first was for excavation of water attenuation pond, whilst the second was for creation of pond and embankment. And now we have creation of ecological pond. The Planning Committee decision of the second application states the proposal has failed to demonstrate the need for the pond. In our opinion, this application still does not justify the need for the pond as identified by the Planning Committee, nor does it justify its large size or the fact that it is built in the slope of the land, as presented in the local residents' objections. Recent additional information has only been supplied to address comments, mainly ecological, made by the various council departments. Of major concern is that there has not been any statement as to who within West Berkshire Council is to be responsible for the monitoring and inspection of the works, including the height reduction and reprofiling of the embankment bund and the installation of the pond membrane. It would be greatly appreciated by the neighbours if this could be stated in the minutes of the meeting. Should the application be approved, we respectfully request that it is stated that the pond will never be used for commercial purposes, either directly or indirectly. And then it's signed on behalf of several residents.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? We do. And Mr. Shard, if I can ask you to invite into the meeting, please, Henry Pito, Cyril Wood and Barry Ayres.
Mr. Pato is in the room, Chairman.
They're all in the room. Thank you very much. So I will go on to ask Councillor Vickers your questions, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Pito, in your statement, you talk about this pond being built into the slope of the hill, and you sort of imply that this is sort of unusual and objectionable. In fact, it's not just built into the slope, it sort of sticks up, and that's why we've got a bund, it's sticking out. In your as a local person who knows the area, would you say this is unusual or indeed even unique in terms of ponds in the area?
Yes, I would. I mean, the water naturally flows down the hill, down through our property, down the Courage Road, and it would naturally, if you're going to have a pond, this would be at lower points. I don't think I've ever seen, I think this is a point we discussed last time, a large body of water. This would be about 2 acres that will in fact be sit in a slope, and therefore to me this seems to be that it's not a natural place for a body of water. And the original reason that was given was in order to sort of to act as an attenuation pond to collect the water, but this is the wrong place to put it. I don't have any issue with a body of water. It just strikes me this is this is the wrong place to have a body of water of this size and scale near residential.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. That was what I was thinking you'd say, but that's useful. The wrong place to put it. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer, Mr. Pito. Councillor Cole's got a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Pito. Mr. Pito, you mentioned that the water runoff into Courage Road. It's been an exceptionally wet October. So could you say whether there's been a significant increase in runoff onto the Courage Road from this site during this very wet month?
Yeah, well, there's been an increase of runoff ever since probably if you remember, we go back in time. They started this development without consent because they believed that they had permitted development. I think about 30 or 40 trees were removed. That immediately increased the runoff onto the Courage Road. So, the idea that that this is going to stop the runoff over the last couple of years has actually made it worse. It's exaggerated it. We see the evidence around us in terms of the number of trees that have been removed. It strikes me rather perverse that this is being billed as an ecological pond, but in fact there's already the damage and deforestation has already been done to the area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cole. We have no more questions for you, Mr. Pito, so I'll ask Mr. Shard to invite you back into the waiting room. You can hear the rest of the debate in there. Thank you. Now then, we have no submissions for support of this application, but we do from the agent. Mrs. Legg, please.
Yes, Chairman, I will just share my screen again. So this is from the agent. Oh no, hang on, wrong one. One moment. So this is the applicant.
You can make it a little larger, please. Thank you.
Is that okay?
If you can go a bit bigger, I'd appreciate it.
There?
That's it. Thank you.
This application has sought to comprehensively address the matters raised by councillors and neighbours during the determination of application 19/00317//FUL. The application was recommended for approval by officers but subsequently refused at committee. Landscape impact. The site has been used historically for sand extraction and has since been restored. The site forms a transition between open fields and woodland to the south and the groups of dwellings to the north and east of the site. Therefore, the site does not have the appearance of traditional open countryside. The existing bunds will be reprofiled to soften the slopes from a 1:4 gradient to a 1:3. This will aid in creating the appearance of the bunds to a more natural feature within the landscape, further enhanced by a wildflower seed mix. The pond will appear as a natural feature as aquatic planting within the pond and marginal planting around the edges of the pond will soften the appearance of the water body. It is considered that the pond, together with the soft planting proposed, will preserve the character and appearance of the site within the North Wessex Downs AONB in accordance with policies CS13 and CS19. Ecology and trees. The proposal incorporates substantial biodiversity enhancements to the landscape, setting in the form of bee banks, reptile amphibian refuge, removal of the laurel hedge and its replacement with a native hedge, the protection of existing trees, wildflower meadows, aquatic and marginal planting in accordance with policy CS17. The council's ecologist and tree officer has no objection to the scheme. It is confirmed that no trees have been removed from the application site, nor is there any intention to remove any trees as part of this application. Drainage. Concerns have again been raised by the PC and neighbours in relation to potential flooding implications of the development. Our two experts, both highly experienced professionals, have provided formal statements to confirm that the proposed pond design does not pose any flood risk whatsoever to the surrounding area, neighbouring properties or the road. It is confirmed that the bunds are not water retaining structures. Alternative locations were considered for the soakaways, but for the proposal to operate efficiently, they need to be sited on land which is lower than the pond, hence the location chosen. The structure of the bunds is based on advice provided from a reservoir panel engineer who specialises in the safety of reservoir banks, even though the bunds are not water retaining. Full details of the inspection and maintenance routine is contained within the supporting documents. These documents have been specified in the conditions which would be attached to any permission granted. It is considered that the proposal is in accordance with policy CS16 and the council's drainage engineer has no objections. In summary, this proposal would greatly enhance the landscape setting of the site through the numerous soft landscaping and biodiversity enhancements proposed, and we therefore hope you are able to support the officer's recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Mrs. Legg. I do see that we do have questions of the agent. So, Mr. Shard, if you could invite in, please, Jill Scrivener, who's the agent, and Seaton Fairhurst, who's the applicant. We have them in the room. Am I correct?
Hello. Yes, you do, Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to go with Adrian Abbs to start. Councillor Abbs, please, your question. And gentlemen, we can see who you are. We can see you, Mr. Fairhurst, and I can see Mrs. Scrivener, and also Catherine. I've got Catherine Sadler as well. Would you indicate who's going to be the prime person to answer? And if you need to delegate it to your colleague, then please say so. But obviously, if it's to the agent, we'll know that it will be Jill Scrivener who will be answering the question. So, Adrian Abbs.
Thank you, Chair. Is it not possible to have the videos on of all three people we're asking questions of?
That is their prerogative, I think, whether they wish to be or not.
Okay, thank you. Because I thought we had to have our videos on at all time whilst we were doing this, but okay. No, the questions are, you mentioned sand, used to be sand extraction. When? Just for clarity, please. There's obviously an existing bunt that must have begun work some time ago. Where did the material for that bunt come from? And you made a comment in the proposal about no trees have been cleared, except the officer clearly said that for the soakaways, trees have been cleared away. So could you answer those three questions, please?
I think perhaps I can answer those questions best, having known the site longest. The sand extraction continued until the mid to late 80s, and the consequence of it was to render the portion of the sand extraction area which is within this application a topsoil-free flat area of land. It was earlier described as a slope. It is not, in fact, a slope. It flattens off within the application site at the point of the road, and in the absence of topsoil, it's basically a clay base upon which it's impossible to grow pasture land, and it's been barren to everything but gorse and bramble for a considerable time. Sorry, the second question.
The material for the bunt, where did
yeah, so the material from the bund came from the initial excavation. I'll answer the first and second and third questions at the same time. Where I was unfortunately very poorly advised when we first commenced the project, and was advised that it fell within permitted development. We therefore commenced an excavation program to create the pond. The initial excavation went from the east point of the site westwards, and the bunds were created out of that excavation. But
that's sufficient. I think we've got to just concentrate on these planning issues. Councillor Abbott, your last question.
I think that was all three.
Yeah, they mentioned about the comment about trees, and none have been. The statement says none have been cleared except for the attenuation. The soakaway, sorry. It was mentioned by the officer that some trees had been cleared to make way for those.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, that's not quite correct. I think that there's been a misconception about tree clearance. There were a number of trees around Vine Cottage, but never on this site itself. There were gorse and there were hawthorn bushes, and there were some small trees, but no large mature trees have ever been cleared from this site, either the soakaway or the pond.
Thank you, Mr. Fairhurst. I'm going to move on now to Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is about the statement, this part of the statement. I think it's a question addressed to the planning agent, Jill Scrivener, because it is asserted in the statement that this proposal will preserve the character and appearance of the site. And a little bit higher up, it says that it is a more natural feature with the landscape. On what basis do you think that this pond, which, as I discussed with the previous speaker, the local resident, is a very unnatural feature in this sort of landscape, sitting up above the landscape as it does with its bund? So, and just as an aside, I noticed you've quoted policy CS13, which is about transport. So I'm a bit puzzled as to why that's mentioned in the context of ponds and character and appearance of the site, unless I've got the version of the core strategy in front of me.
I'm going to ask, if I may, refer that question to Catherine Sadler, our senior planner who prepared the planning statement.
Hello, councillors.
Good evening, Douglas.
In order to answer your queries, just to clarify that the pond and the actual water body will be sat actually below the existing land level. So it certainly doesn't rise up any higher than the existing land levels. The pond will actually be excavated out of the existing land levels, and the proposed water level will be below the existing land level. The bunds are actually a separate feature, obviously, in the landscape. They will not be water retaining bunds. They are purely landscape features. So the water level will not go above the base of the bunds. So they, just to clarify, obviously they are not water retaining features. They are separate landscape features as part of this proposal. So the water level will not increase above the existing land level, but obviously the pond will be excavated to ensure that the water level is below the existing land levels.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. A question for Mr. Fairhurst, if that's okay. Welcome to the meeting, Mr. Fairhurst. It's commendable that you want to create a pond for ecological reasons, but I was just wondering if you have such concerns, why you've removed so many trees from your property. You're probably aware that one of the objectors submitted some images from Google Maps showing that there were a considerable number of trees on that site previously. If members of the committee haven't had a chance to see it yet, it's Barry and Elizabeth Ayres' submission on the website actually contains a couple of images from Google Maps. So I'd be interested to know why so many trees were removed.
Well, again, I think this is a misconception. As I say, there were trees on in the garden around Vine Cottage and in a part of the field which is not part of this application. But there was not the considerable numbers that people are talking about were never removed from this site. Those trees that were removed were laurel and rhododendron and recently planted garden trees. There weren't large mature trees ever removed from this site, and specifically not from the area within this application.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you. I think it's probably a question for either Miss Scrivener or Miss Sadler. We've heard Mr. Clark's significant concerns this evening regarding too little technical information being presented, and in the update report we see that a pre-commencement condition is required. I want you to confirm to me that you are happy with these pre-commencement conditions.
Yes, we've spoken to the applicant already this evening, obviously having only received the update for the committee, obviously sort of about 5 o'clock this afternoon, but we've had a read of those conditions and the applicant is agreeable to those. So obviously they cover the construction method statement, they cover the bund construction method statement and the panel engineer supervision. I can reiterate that our panel engineer has actually designed the bunds. So the bunds shown on the plans have been designed by a reservoir panel engineer, which obviously your planning officer has advised that that is somebody that would be qualified to design such bunds. And again, and that engineer would supervise the building and construction of those bunds to ensure that they meet with your requirements.
Thank you, Mrs. Sadler. And Councillor Barnett.
I think the question probably addressed to Mr. Fairhurst. I've driven past the site many a time of late, including the last couple of days, just to have a quick glance around to get my idea of where the position of the pond will be. What I'm a little bit unclear about is that surrounding, obviously, and I think you were mentioning the house and the garden area and the whole site, it looks as if there's quite a considerable raised level of materials, and presumably that sort of partial bending that is already in place, is that going to form part of it, or is this something that's going to have to be levelled off and then moved into the right position?
There's no area around the house or outside of the specific application site which forms bunding for the pond. As my planning consultant just mentioned, the level of the pond is below the road level and the land levels around the site. And the trees that are on the site between Vine Cottage and I think the levels that you're talking about and the pond itself preclude there being any water at that level. The water will be below that level and below the ground level of the road. So no, there's no movement of land anticipated around the house or anywhere other than on the pond site itself, where excavations will take place, and some between the pond and the access track.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Councillor Bennyworth.
No, I'm out. Thank you, Chairman. Questions answered.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Members, I have no more questions. So thank you, Mrs. Sadler, Mrs. Scrivener and Mr. Fairhurst. Mr. Shard will now quietly usher you back to the waiting room, and we will now have the presentation from the ward member, which is Councillor Cole. You know the format, Councillor Cole. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this is the third time this application has come before this committee. On the 2 previous occasions, the application was refused because of the concerns of Mr. Clark, our principal engineer, regarding the unsuitability of the bund and concerns around flooding and the maintenance of the soakaways. And from what Mr. Clark has said this evening, this still seems to be the case. And although I accept that the applicant has gone a long way to address the issues raised by both local residents and, more importantly, by Mr. Clark, I still share the residents' concerns regarding who within West Berkshire will be responsible for the monitoring and inspection of the works. Although I assume that this is a building control issue during construction, I'd like some assurances from officers that the ongoing maintenance of the pond and soakaways will be regularly monitored should the application be approved. Cheveley Parish Council is particularly concerned regarding the maintenance of the soakaways, as failure to do this could mean that cottages alongside footpath 32 may be subject to flooding. And although I note that the authority has worked closely with the applicant to secure an acceptable development in accordance with economic, social and environmental principles, I would like it to be conditioned, should members approve this application, that this pond is not to be used for any commercial purpose, as it's in a sensitive area within the AONB. Having said all of that, I can't support this application because the pond is out of keeping with the surrounding landscape, which is wooded lowland mosaic, not open countryside, as the agent is saying in their statement. And my recall is that the whole of this site was really quite heavily wooded, because when I used to drive along Courage Road before the site was cleared, Vine Cottage was almost invisible in the landscape. I firmly believe that this pond will have an adverse impact on the AONB, where developments are expected to enhance the landscape. And in my view, this pond will not. And therefore, I will not be supporting this application, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Have we any questions of clarification of Councillor Cole? We do. Councillor Abbs.
Oh, thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Cole, maybe you can clarify for me, because the bunt keep being mentioned, and the bunt is not a natural thing as far as I can tell. In your experience when driving by, do you know when it was actually put up? And
I think the bund was put up at the before the first application was received, Councillor Abs, because you've heard that the applicant has said that they felt it was they could carry on their works under permitted development rights. So it's got to be prior to 2017. And at that time, that stretch of road was fenced, and then the bund, which in my view is an unnatural feature, was constructed. So it has been there probably 4 years, 5 years maximum.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Cole, the applicant said that the trees that have been removed from the site are laurel and rhododendron. What would your comment be on that?
To be honest, Councillor Culver, I couldn't comment totally, but my recall is that the site was extremely wooded with some quite significant trees. And I accept that it's reclaimed land because it was used for sand extraction, but nonetheless trees were growing on that site, and it was a well-wooded, well-screened site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. We've got no more questions. Members, it's time now to ask questions of Mrs. Cutts and Mr. Clark. I'd just like to take an initiative here for Mrs. Cutts and maybe Mr. Till. Prior to this discussion taking place, to just give us some direction here, we've got almost what we might consider a building regs issue alongside a planning issue. And what the members have got to look at is the planning issues here and not be slightly, am I correct, in being drawn in the fact that this is the third application, as Councillor Cole has said. And here we are from Mr. Clark's presentation saying we're no further forward with regard to the design of the pond, the maintenance of the overflow pipe, and it's still waiting those issues which are going to load up the conditions of this application if it is approved, and we're no further forward really than we were on certainly the previous applications. Can you assist us on where we should be looking with our deliberations? Who'd like to answer that, Mr. Till or Mrs. Cutts?
I can answer that. I think we are further forward. I think Stuart Clark might be able to just advise a little bit more about the technicalities of what is requested in these additional conditions. It would be we would be relying on the professional qualifications of the panel engineer or the geotechnical engineer that supplies the information. It would be a requirement that the amendments to the bunds are made in accordance with those details and calculations, which would be subsequently approved. They wouldn't be able to construct anything which hadn't been approved. So I'm satisfied that should they submit these details, then we would have a scheme that would overcome those concerns that have been raised, because they would require approval by suitably qualified people to do the work, and we are requiring a watching brief during the construction.
From what you're saying is that we actually concentrate our interests on the impact on the OMB, flood, ecological and highways. These are the planning issues.
That's right, yes. I mean, there is a flooding issue if these details aren't correct and aren't adequate, but I think, yes, the main issues are the appearance, whether we think this is appropriate development, and the conditions will deal with those flooding matters.
Thank you. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Cutts, could you comment on what the applicant said when he was asked why bunds were built before he had the planning application submitted? He said that he was poorly advised and was told it was permitted development. Are you able to comment on that?
As far as I'm aware, he was advised by his own. He wasn't advised by West Berkshire Planning Department. There are some under the permitted development rights that that agricultural units have. There are some works, drainage works, that do have permitted development rights, and he was trying to use those. However, what was being built wasn't for an agricultural purpose, as far as I'm concerned, and that's why it wasn't permitted development.
Did he ever seek our advice, to your knowledge, at that time?
I can't answer that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Cole. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have a question really for Mr. Clark. You've said again, Mr. Clark, this evening that you do have there's too little technical information that's being presented. Are you confident, Mr. Clark, that the pre-commencement conditions are acceptable and that they will fulfil your requirements?
I am. I would like to have some input into the exact wording, because they are slightly technical. As I say, it was the main concerns are the design calculations, the spillway, and some assurance that it can be maintained safely. Then there's the issue of the construction, how they are constructed, and how we ensure that they're constructed in accordance with the specification and design calculations. That's another matter. I would like a condition attached to this that requires the developer to provide evidence, or to employ a geotechnical engineer or an independent panel engineer to provide us with some evidence that this has been built in accordance with the design and the specification. I would like to point out something. It's been said that this pond is not a water retaining structure. Now, in normal circumstances, when this pond is just sitting there, no, the bunds don't retain water. But it is on a surface water flow route. And when you get an exceptionally severe storm of a 1 in 100 year magnitude, that pond will fill up at a quicker rate that water is being drawn off. And that bund will start to impound water, and it will become a water retaining structure. So what has been said is incorrect. These are water retaining structures, even though they don't retain water for most of the time. I would also like to add a comment about the embankment that is there at the moment. And I said this at the previous meeting. The question was asked, what is it made from? Well, in my opinion, it's made from rubbish. And at the moment, as things stand, it is dangerous. So the landowner hasn't got a very good track record on building water retaining structures. I know I'm veering into personal opinion here, but I just want to make the point that this is a small raised embankment reservoir. These are water retaining structures. They need to be designed, and we need to supervise the construction of them to ensure that they meet the design standard.
Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. I am actually out again. Officers are doing a great job in preempting my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. My question is actually going right back to the basics. This is agricultural land, and we're being asked to build a pond. So is this not a straightforward change of use application? Because the result will make it look more garden-like than it will agricultural-like. I'm not sure what the... Is it not a change of use, officers? Right. Anybody?
Mrs. Nuts, can you answer that question whilst it's been asked?
Well, at the moment, there is no use proposed for the pond. They're saying it is just there to retain water as ecological pond. There's no use class that it's being changed to. So,
yeah, it was just earlier on that we were saying, someone mentioned that this was for initially this was put forward as a pond for agriculture, something to do with agriculture and ponds on agricultural land, but it's clearly not, because that's got refused. And so why, just putting the word eco in front of it doesn't make it better, but debate later.
That's an observation. Well done. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I think my questions probably should be addressed to Mr. Clark, who's actually, I think, partially started talking about bun material. We've got a proposal for a pond of something in the order of 40 metres by 58 by the possibility of 1.5 metre depth, and then added on for the extra, as what's been suggested by various people, if you've got extra amount of flow of liquid. We're talking about thousands, if not million gallons of water. Surely that is one of the big issues which I think is possibly needs to be addressed in relationship to the weight of the water, which could have a hell of a pressure on the side of the buns. And we've only got to think of what happened in North Yorkshire last year with a certain dam which eventually broke away. But, seriously, Mr. Clark, are we talking about millions of gallons of water, the weight?
I don't have the figures as to how much water this could potentially impound, but it is, by any standards, a vast amount of water. And if there was a catastrophic breach in the embankment, somebody would get seriously hurt. This needs to be properly engineered. It's not just a case of whipping up some material that you dig up on the site and just forming a bank with it. It really has got to be designed and constructed to very stringent standards. My concern here is purely safety.
Thank you. I've no more questions. I come back again, if I may, to Mrs. Cutts, that you might advise us on this, that the question of safety has now come into this, and what weight should we add? This is a planning application. Please advise.
Chairman, I think maybe it's best that I step in and advise on that. Members,
Mr. Till, that there is now concern by our drainage engineer on the construction, and as I say, this is sort of breaching on sort of a building regs issue when we've got a planning application before us. And I think I'm trying to focus the minds here on the planning application and not be drawn on the safety issues, and for you to advise us how we ought to address that, please.
Members, we're dealing with drainage and flood risk here. So this is one of the rare instances where planning could be said to overlap quite a long way into a technical field, particularly because we've published supplementary planning guidance on drainage, flood risk, and sustainable drainage systems. The concerns raised in terms of water management, surface water management, underground water management, and safety in those respects are matters that we would routinely consult with Mr. Clark and his team, the lead local flood authority, on. So it is perfectly legitimate, in my view, to be considering whether the conditions that are recommended in this case would be sufficient in order to ensure that the passage of water would be such as to be controlled, not to risk resulting in damage to health and safety or property in extreme flood event situations, because that is, after all, what we seek to do in terms of our supplementary planning guidance and also our planning policy on flood risk management. I would urge members to scrutinise the conditions that have been put in front of them, particularly in terms of the update sheet, and to consider Mr. Clark's advice in terms of the fact that it is our view that conditions can control drainage, flood risk, water management on this site, but they do need to be sufficiently stringent. And were members minded to recommend approval, but under the caveat that Mr. Clark was reconsulted to have his input thoroughly into the wording of those conditions, that would be a perfectly reasonable stance, in my view, for members to take.
Thank you, Mr. Teal, because that was my concern, that this committee certainly isn't qualified to, I think, apply the appropriate conditions should they go for approval. Thank you very much. Members, we're now open to debate. Who would like to start? Councillor Cole, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't help feeling that we're actually back to square one here with regard to the safety of these this site, the bunds and the maintenance. In my view, safety is absolutely paramount. We've heard that in Mr. Clark's opinion, insufficient technical information is being given, and I'm nervous about approving this application because the pre-commencement conditions haven't been, the applicant has said that they've not had much time to read the pre-application conditions, and there may be an argument then, if we approve it, that the applicant comes back and doesn't agree with the pre-application conditions because they're too stringent. And therefore, Chairman, I would like to propose that we actually refuse this application until we see a better quality application, taking into account all the comments that have been made this time, last time, and the time before, because quite frankly, nothing much has changed.
Yep. Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm like Councillor Cole in that I would like to see this one refused, but I'm quite prepared to set aside the drainage and accept that it's a technical matter, providing Mr. Clark is allowed to tweak the wording of these conditions. I would accept what Mr. Tilden says and agree that maybe the conditions are adequate in that area of drainage. I would go back even more fundamentally to say, why have we got a pond here proposed at all? I don't think that we can approve this under policy CS19 alone. This is the AONB, and this is an AONB that we are trusted to look after. It is a very diverse AONB. I know, for example, along the slopes of Greenham and Crookham Commons and Bucklebury Common, there are ponds. I don't recall seeing one as big as this, but none of them are so close to a highway, so visible to passers-by as this one. And I just think we can refuse this. And if I could just read the actual wording of the of CS90, where I think it gives us the reason to refuse. This does not, as Councillor Cole has said, it certainly doesn't enhance, and I think it harms the landscape character of the district in this particular area in terms of its local distinctiveness of this part of the AONB. And it does not ensure that we would not, by passing this, ensure that new development is appropriate in terms of the location and design. So, you know, assuming the drainage aspects are fine, I just think to see this bund from the road as you pass by would be totally inappropriate. And, you know, maybe there are ecological benefits through having a pond, but can we please have it sunk into the ground and away from the road and looking more like a natural feature than a very large feature, which will only benefit the owner in terms of landscape when he looks at it from his cottage.
Thank you. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm in mixed minds on this, to be honest. Part of me thinks that aesthetically, I think it would look a lot better than what's there at the moment. And I like the idea of the wild meadow on top of the bund. But what bothers me, I suppose, is Mr. Clark's comments. So I think it would actually enhance the AONB rather than the opposite view. But unless we can get some clear controls over how it's built, I'll have to vote against.
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chair. For me, this is even simpler. Bunts are not a natural thing in an area of Anding Butcher. They're a man-made thing. So on that reason alone, this is an inappropriate development. And in fact, to Councillor Wollaston's comment just then about we could improve the look of the ones, we could, or we could just flatten them back out and put the soil back where it came from. That would achieve and let the trees grow back, which had been growing for 30 years quite happily before they got cleared away. So there's no enhancement that I can see in the short term, or by just allowing a pond. However, I would be quite keen to get enforcement involved and tell them to put the bunt back where it was, because it shouldn't have been. It shouldn't be there in the first place.
Councillor Kent.
Just to say that I would support the arguments put forward by Councillor Cole and Councillor Wollaston, and I will be voting against.
Thank you. I'm looking for a second. I've got a proposer. I've got a second, please. Councillor Wollaston, I'll put you in there.
So can I come back on this? My concern, I think, is that the existing.
Seconding or not?
No, I'm not. I'd like to come back in.
Yes, certainly.
My concern here is that, as I understand it from what's been said, the land is actually of very poor quality now, and I question whether we could actually get trees back on it. So this might not be such a bad solution to some pretty ropey land which has been extracted for sand.
Thank you. Members, I have a proposer, Councillor Cole. I have Councillor Vickers to second. Therefore, I'm going to go.
I do second it, but I will only second it on condition that we add the CS19 argument to reasons for refusal, because I'm not feeling too strong about the other reasons.
No, I'm coming to that. I shall, before I put it to the vote, I should say Mrs. Butts and Mrs. Armour. Can we include Councillor Vickers' note here on the condition? Why, possibly, before we put it to the vote, maybe a refusal. So I'm going to put this to the vote now of the proposer, Councillor Cole, seconded by Councillor Vickers, and the recommendation is for headed planning countryside be authorised to refuse this planning application 20/00761. That's a full application at Vine Cottage at Courage. Mrs. Armour, would you conduct the vote, please?
I think I would certainly probably like to clarify the reasons for refusal, and because I don't know if quite the planning officers have got them down in detail. So I think we just need a little discussion just to be absolutely certain officers know what it's been refused on.
Thank you. Cuts, are you clear there with the reasons we were looking? Impact, flooding, ecology and highways, and certainly one was the policy maybe of impact.
Yeah, so impact on flooding.
I think the OMB generally was
impact on the landscape.
Effect on the landscape.
Yeah. Councillor Cole, anything to add to that?
No, Chairman, I think the other thing is just the safety aspect. Technical, lack of technical information.
Bill, are you happy with that being an issue?
So I've got that we've got concerns with flood risk, insufficient information in respect of flood risk, and impact on the character and amenity of the landscape in AONB.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mrs. Armour, are you now happy with the reasons of being recorded?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Chair, if I may, did we not have a change of use in there somewhere? Because this is very much changing the use of
clarification on that, did we? Mrs. Cutts, is that an issue that you have considered in your deliberations, that a change of use is or is not required? Mr. Till's arting to
Can
speak.
I step in and advise on that, please, Chairman? The default situation of land that doesn't have another use class is agricultural. So this application has been submitted without any stated change of use of the land. Now, irrespective of what councillors may be concerned might result from the works being conducted, There is no stated intention to use these works for domestic or commercial purposes. The intention is to maintain the existing use of land, which is agricultural.
Thank you. I've got a hand up of Councillor Cant. Did you want to wish to add a condition?
No, sorry, Chair. I should have put it down.
Thank you. Then we're all clear. Everybody's happy. Then I will ask Mrs. Armour, please, to carry out the name vote.
Okay, so this is to refuse the application for the reasons we've just discussed. Councillor Abbs.
For.
Councillor Barnett.
For refusal.
Councillor Bennyworth.
For refusal.
Councillor Cant.
For refusal.
Councillor Cole.
For refusal.
Councillor Culver.
For refusal.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Wollaston.
For.
Councillor Hooker.
For.
So that's unanimous for refusal.
Thank you. The decision is then of this committee that this application is refused. Thank you very much, members. We now move on to the third application this evening. This is 20/01924 House. This is the bungalow at Down End in Cheveley. And this has come to committee due to the members' call-in. I'll ask Mr. Till to make this presentation, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just arrange to share my screen. There we go. Thank you, Chairman. Members, this application seeks retrospective planning permission to regularise a breach of conditions at the bungalow in Down End Cheveley, namely condition 1 of planning permission 10/02895/house, which required obscuring and fixing shut of a roof light in the western elevation of a previously approved extension. The application has been brought to committee by call-in from the ward member in order to consider the impact on neighbouring amenity. The bungalow is located outside of settlement and within the AONB. As the works to extend the dwelling have already been carried out, there is a single issue for members to consider, which is the impact of the alterations on the neighbouring occupants to the west, which is Sunhill Cottage, you'll see on that plan. The unauthorised works that the application seeks permission for are unfixing of the window so that it can be fully opened, which officers understand has already taken place, and the removal of obscure glazing, which is understood was secured through the use of an obscure glazing film. For clarity, the condition which has been breached is as follows. The roof light window in the western elevation shall be fitted with fixed, unopenable obscure glazing unless details of any method of opening have been submitted to and agreed in writing by the local planning authority. The obscure glazing shall thereafter be retained in position, irrespective of the provisions of the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order 1995 or any subsequent revision. No additional openings shall be inserted in the west elevation, including the roof facing west, without the prior permission in writing of the local planning authority. The reason given is in the interest of the amenity of neighbouring properties. Members, the officer's report for the permission that this condition is attached to gives a very scant explanation for the reason that it is necessary or an exploration of the relationship between the bungalow and Sunhill Cottage. The report on your committee agenda assesses this relationship in greater detail. The two dwellings are side by side, and the distance from the west elevation of the bungalow to the shared boundary is approximately 15 metres. The distance between the west elevation of the bungalow and the east elevation of Sunhill Cottage is approximately 19 metres. There have been 7 objections and 3 letters of support for this application. The objections raised concerns principally with overlooking between the roof light in the bungalow and a bathroom window in Sunhill Cottage, which is approximately 19 metres away. The report notes that in terms of overlooking, both the Council's House Extension SPG and the Quality Design SPD concern themselves principally with back-to-back relationships between windows of habitable rooms, and generally overlooking concerns in respect of non-habitable rooms, which include bathrooms, are given a much lesser weight. It is not usual for conditions to be applied in the interest of safeguarding privacy and amenity where the openings concerned are those of non-habitable rooms and where the separation distance between the two dwellings is so great. The report goes on to note that the viewing angle out of the roof light concerned would be oblique, so views out of it would be limited. Members, your officer's view that is that in consideration of the considerable separation between the roof light concerned and the bathroom window, which I think that picture there demonstrates quite well, the oblique viewing angle and the lack of supporting justification for the condition in the original planning commission, there isn't sufficient justification to retain this condition. I also have concerns as to how the council would fare at appeal if this application to vary condition was refused due to the lack of justification and the considerations the case officer has made. There's no additional comments or variation to the recommendation are made in your update. It's your officer's recommendation that the condition is varied to remove the requirements in respect of fixing and obscure glazing as set out in part 8 of the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Mrs. Legg, we're now going to move on to your submissions that have been sent in to us. We've had no submission from the Parish Council, but we do have a submission from an objector. Could you read that out for us, please?
Chairman, I'll just share my screen for you. So this is the objectors. Just double check. Yeah, the objection. Oh, make it bigger. So we are writing to object to the above application. When the Pearces rebuilt the bungalow completely, the Velux windows were not in the original plans for the house. They were built without knowledge by us or our neighbours, bypassing the planning laws. Retrospection permission was only granted under the strict condition that the elevation shall be fixed shut with obscured glaze to protect privacy for both parties. The council issued these conditions for a reason, as the window built at the higher elevation looks directly into our bathroom window and continues to do so. This has not changed. One thing that had changed since the council granted retrospective permission for the window is the birth of our daughter in 2012. The window looks directly into our family shower and bathroom, which is of course deeply concerning, especially as we have a young child. The pictures provided by the owners are misleading and their statement is untrue. The fact that this Velux window looks directly into our bathroom is more intrusive than any habitable room and is of deep concern for the safety of my child. When the Velux window has been opened or the obscured film removed by the current tenants, we can see directly into their property. They can see into our bathroom, which is also open for ventilation. Photographs have been provided previously to highlight how close their window is and their disregard for the planning conditions. A previous tenant of the bungalow living in Cheveley is quite happy to testify, stating that she could easily reach the top of the Velux window and is in no doubt that if opened, she would be able to see directly into our bathroom. Both her and another ex-tenant have said that there was no reason to open this window, as there are two other larger windows in the room providing adequate ventilation and light. The bungalow is a tenanted property and has had a changeover of 6 tenants, staying an average of 2 years or less since rebuilt in 2010. There is a constant worry of not knowing who will be our new neighbour, which is a concern for the safety of our child if this condition is reversed. We have lived happily in this property for 23 years and love our community, but the prospect of this condition being reversed has cast a shadow over our lives and is deeply upsetting and of grave concern. We implore you not to alter the original council decision, as this does seriously affect our privacy, as it does the privacy of any tenant, and is deeply concerning for the safety of our child. Yours sincerely.
Thank Mrs. Members, I can see Councillor Vickers, you've got a question, yes?
Yes, Chairman, I have.
Just 1 moment. I'll just get Mr. Shard to invite Mrs. Chamberlain into our meeting. Good evening, Mrs. Chamberlain. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
We have and we can see you now. That's lovely. Thank you very much. Two councillors have questions for you currently. The first was Councillor Vickers. Councillor Vickers.
Mr. Chamberlain, thank you for being here. Now, your statement talks about the window being fixed shut as being the condition that was attached. I haven't actually got the verbatim condition on the official document in front of me, but the planning officer prior to the statement when he was introducing the application talked about the window not being fully open. Now there's a difference between fully open and fixed shut, and that is illustrated in our papers by the picture looking out of the Velox window through what looks like a very small crack at the bottom towards your bathroom window. Is it that amount of opening that you object to, or is it the fully condition?
Well, I mean, the conditions were put in place for the window to be completely fixed shut and for not to be opened at all. I mean, when the window has been fully opened, I mean, I can see directly into that room.
So it has been fully opened, right?
Oh, it has been fully opened, going against all the conditions put in place. And it's been going on for 2 years where we've had some exemplary tenants in there who have been really lovely, but the last 2 tenants, the previous tenant removed the film and opened the window completely. And certainly the present tenants have done the same up until recently. So it hasn't really been enforced. I mean, this is what brought it to our attention that the window hadn't been fixed down, was the fact that it had been completely fully opened. And I mean, I could see directly into that room. So I'm assuming they can see directly into our only bathroom. We only have 1 window in the bathroom, which we have to open for ventilation to reduce mold. And, and we are getting in and out of our bath or going to the toilet. It is our only family bathroom in the entire house. So obviously it does worry me, and it,
even if
has
it was fixed so that, but what I'm getting at, if it was fixed so that it could only be opened by the amount that is shown in our papers, which is very small amount, that'd still be objectionable to you.
Well, the thing is, I mean, I don't think, because it's a tenanted property, I don't, would it be able to be opened anymore by those tenants?
I mean, you're not confident right.
Yeah, I'm not confident that they would all abide by the rules.
Okay,
because,
thank you.
Like I said they haven't. Some have, until recently, the last 2 tenants haven't. So that's what concerns me, really.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Chamberlain. You say in your submission that this has cast a shadow on your lives. So would you say that this has affected the mental health of your family?
Yes, I think it has, because it has been a constant worry. Not that I'm accusing any tenant there being a peeping Tom or anything. It's just a constant worry of getting in and out of the bath, having to close our blind so we're confident we're not being looked at, because the conditions have been broken that the council put there for the window to be fixed shut with this film on. So as soon as the film was removed and the window opened, I was not confident. Yes, it has affected us. Yes, I would say definitely the last 2 years it has been a worry, and especially a worry for my child and her friends that come and visit and stay with us. So yeah, it has really affected us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Chamberlain. Any more questions, members? No, I can see no more questions. Thank you very much for attending this evening. Mr. Shard will escort you back to your waiting room, and you can listen to the rest of the debate there. And thank you for
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Moving on, members, we have no letters of support, and we have nothing, of course, from the agent or the applicant, but we do now have Councillor Cole back on. So Councillor Cole, you've got your 5 minutes. I'm just going to try and get myself organised. Do bear with me because my normal watch has given up on me, and I'm now trying to get my phone turned on, because you might have heard some alarms going off, which is my phone. Unless I could ask Mrs. Armour, have you got the stopwatch?
I haven't got one, but I can see if I can. My watch will probably be able to do one.
No, I'm back on now. It just takes a while for this to fire up. Now, just bear with me. I'm okay. I'm back in, and so when you're ready, Councillor Cole, we'll go.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think I will take 5 minutes, and I expect members will be wondering why I've brought such a seemingly minor application to committee. This is a tenanted property where there have been many changes of tenant over the years. And I'd like to state at the outset that my issue is not with the current or former tenants, but rather with the owner of the property because of their persistent failure to comply with the planning condition. In this case, the condition was that a Velux window on the west side of the property be fixed, unopenable and obscure glazed. And members should note that this roof light itself had retrospective permission in 2010, as it was in breach of a planning condition of a consent granted in 2009. Over this time, this condition has been ignored to the distress of the adjacent residents of Sunhill Cottage, whose privacy is affected. This condition was imposed originally to protect the privacy of these residents who've lived in the property for over 20 years. The current case officer is recommending approval, whereas a previous case officer refused it. So this is a subjective recommendation rather than an objective one, as nothing has changed in the interim. I ask the committee to also take into account the planning enforcement action over intervening years, because Mrs. Chamberlain has contacted enforcement during this period. My view is that a breach of condition was, if it was a breach of condition was sufficient for enforcement action to be undertaken, then this action should be seriously considered by the committee when reaching a decision. I firmly believe there's an obligation on planning committee members to send a strong message to developers, large or small, that planning conditions are set for a reason and they shouldn't be changed at a whim for their convenience. It makes a mockery of the planning process and treats the local planning authority with contempt. And I would remind members that this is the second retrospective application that we've heard this evening. And for this reason, I can't support this application and ask the planning committee to refuse it, because to do so would not compromise any of our planning policies. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Members, any questions of clarification of Councillor Cole? No. Yes, we do. Councillor Cant. You're muted, Councillor Cant. There we are. That's better.
My apologies. I had meant to, I thought you were about to embark on the full debate, so I was intending to, no questions for Councillor Cole.
Okay, thank you. Now we move on then. Any questions of Mr. Till's presentation? We do. Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Till, you mentioned the planning inspector and what view they might take on this. Would they not also expect the original conditions to be adhered to?
Thank you, Chairman. The planning inspector would certainly have a look at the previous case officer's reason for applying the condition and their report. Now, as I've said, they're scant on detail, although the desire to preserve neighbouring amenity is mentioned. There is little detail by which one would determine that there was an impact on neighbouring amenity. There's no concern mentioned in terms of that neighbouring amenity being compromised. And it's my understanding from reading through the details that the reason the condition was applied is essentially because the roof light was shown as being obscure glazed and fixed shut on the plans, rather than the case officer having given the sort of detailed consideration that I would expect to whether neighbouring amenity was being compromised. Now, my view is that in this case, the case officer who considered this amendment to the condition has given due consideration to neighbouring amenity, and her conclusion that this is a secondary non-habitable room even of a bathroom. It's something that in terms of planning policy and in terms of our SPG and SPD, limited weight is given to that. Traditionally, one would expect a bathroom window to be closed at least most of the time that the bathroom is in use. One would expect it to be obscure glazed. One would expect the user of that bathroom to be paying some attention to their own privacy, should I suggest. And the 19-metre separation distance between the two is considerably larger than separation distances that we would often look at in terms of a side-by-side relationship of windows where one of those windows, the one that stands to be overlooked, is of a non-habitable room. So I can't disagree in this case with the case officer's conclusions on that.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Any more questions of the officers?
Just one, Councillor Chairman.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Till. I thought we did have a 20-metre rule on taking the habitable room comment to the side slightly for the moment. I thought we did have a 20-metre rule that we should have between views of this nature. And honestly, to be honest, if we're saying looking into somebody else's bathroom and it's suddenly the person that's in the bathroom that's now got to cover up, I can't quite agree with you, if you don't mind. It's who's there first, and a window that's been put there without consent in the wrong way, it doesn't protect precedence over someone who's already living there and enjoying fresh air. So but anyway, the 20 metre is the question. I thought we had a rule that's 20 metres.
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of the 20 metres, actually 21 metres is the separation distance specified between rear-facing windows of two properties, so a back-to-back relationship between windows of habitable rooms, two windows of habitable rooms that stand to overlook each other directly. So you would be talking the same height and a very direct, immediate overlooking. And in that case, policy, the SPD, recommends that 21 metres is given in order to preserve privacy, but that doesn't exist in policy for side-by-side relationships and not for non-habitable rooms. So if we were talking about two bedrooms facing each other, absolutely that would be correct if they were on the rear elevation. Side-by-side, it's not the same rules.
Councillor Cant.
Yes, Chair. Mr. Till, I'm slightly puzzled here, I guess, in that it seems that the first planning officer considered it appropriate to impose a condition that this window should be obscure and fixed. And now another planning officer's come along and said, no, on reflection, that's not a requirement. So I just wonder how you stack up those two things, because I tend to agree with Councillor Cole that, if conditions imposed and discussed by a previous committee, it should be enforced. That's what they intended, and that would have been the advice of the planning officer. So how do you now say that you can resile on the initial recommendation and say, well, actually, it doesn't really matter?
Thank you, Chairman. Now, as I say, typically, and in accordance with guidance to planning officers, I would expect that the matter of why the condition was imposed and imposed the restriction that it does to be discussed in detail in the case officer's report, and to be given in the reason for the condition. In this case, the reason for the condition is simply in the interest of amenity of neighbouring properties, which is quite vague. And the report goes into very little detail in terms of any desire to preserve privacy and amenity, what room they would be preserving the privacy and amenity of. Quite simply, the case officer appears to have been presented with a plan that shows that this window would be obscured and fixed shut, and has then conditioned it in accordance with the plan they've been presented with, without giving due consideration to whether that condition is necessary in this case.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers?
Yeah, I'm just pursuing the same line of argument, but slightly different one. Thinking of the possibility of appeal where we were minded to refuse. What weight, if any, would enforcement action having been taken, which, as I understand, either from yourself or case officer, either yourself or the ward member, Councillor Cole, has happened? Because I would find it most surprising, given the difficulty is to get enforcement action on anything currently. If enforcement action was taken here, it must have been instigated by the neighbour, who's the one that's the aggrieved party. And for an officer to come out and actually even begin enforcement action is surprising. But if that had happened, what weight would an inspector give to that fact?
Councillor Vickers, thank you. As I understand it, this isn't a case where enforcement action has been taken. This is a case where an enforcement investigation has been made following a report that a condition was being breached. So the council hasn't taken formal action to enforce against this breach of condition, given that there's an application in front of you to regularise it. Should that application be refused, then the council will need to consider whether it is expedient to follow that refusal with enforcement action, to wait until an appeal, in which case we may see whether the appeal was determined before enforcement action was taken in respect of it, or to set aside enforcement action because there isn't harm justified in doing it. So I would suggest that the members' decision in this committee meeting probably has a significant input into the considerations that are to be made in respect of any potential enforcement action, and that a refusal would be something that officers would need to look at, and the reasons given for refusal in terms of whether enforcement action should be taken to seek that the condition was adhered to.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Mr. Till, am I not right to say the original application did have the window fixed with obscure glass? So it wasn't an officer's condition, that was the initial submission at that application, was it not? This application is for retrospective, that they'd open that window and they want to continue to keep it open.
That I believe, Chairman, is correct, that the plans provided, I'm actually quoting from the case officer's report. The Velux on the west elevation faces the neighbouring property. The plans provided indicated that this Velux is to be obscured, glazed and fixed shut, therefore mitigating loss of privacy and overlooking issues. That is what the officer's report says, and the entirety of it in respect of the overlooking. So as you've asked, Chairman, it was the plan submitted with that application rather than the officer's own suggestion that it was fixed and obscured.
Members, we're going to move on to the debate, but as our constitution requires, We need to take a vote as to whether you're happy to continue this business past 10 o'clock. And I consider where we are with the debate and the vote to be taken, we can conclude the business by 10:30. Be minded, if we can't, this will have to be deferred. So I'm going to just have a show of hands. Are we, as a committee, happy to continue after 10 o'clock? 1, 2, me, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is confirmed. Are you happy with that, Mrs. Armour?
Yes, it was unanimous.
Then we will continue to the debate. Who would like to start the debate, please? We're straight in with Councillor Abbs. Well done, Councillor Abbs.
Actually, Councillor Camp was before me. If that helps.
The trouble as I have is that with the system I've got going at the moment, I can't get, if you all put them up at once, it's difficult for me to determine.
Slightly.
Cole. I will take Councillor Cole first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm having a problem with my... Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having a problem with my screen. Chairman, I do want to also note that we have had no submission from the applicant this evening, so we've absolutely no idea why the applicant wants to change this window arrangement, which I find really very odd. My view is that if the applicant was really keen to do this, in light of the fact that they have ignored the planning condition, they should have made a very good reason to us for the change of the use. And therefore, Chairman, I'm not happy with this, and I would like to propose that we refuse the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be happy to second Councillor Cole's recommendation, but here's why. It appears we have a slight mistake made by an officer in not detailing something. It appears we have a small issue with our policy and that it could be tightened up to include things that are within 21 metres that clearly, I don't know what that room is used for at the top, but let's assume it's a bedroom into a bathroom. It just doesn't sound private to me at all. So I can see harm to someone for sure. I potentially see benefit, but as Councillor Cole just pointed out, no submission by the, no information from the applicant at all. Couldn't even be bothered to turn up. So I don't see any reason to change what exists. And unfortunately, therefore, I would go against officers' advice.
Thank you, Councillor Kent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just very briefly, I concur completely with Councillor Cole's observation that we've now had two fairly open breaches of what was originally granted planning consent. Secondly, I note the words that Simon Till has quoted from the original planning consent by the planning officer, which said that quite openly that the fixing and obscuring of the window would preserve the privacy of the other property. So I should be voting in favour of refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston.
My daughter's now 35, but when she was 8, I would have taken exactly the same view. I'm certainly going to vote against the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett.
Well, this is a typical example of the new mode that we're finding ourselves in. I have to say to you, prior to coming to the meeting tonight, my view was when I visited the two properties the other day and looked, and I thought, well, there's a long distance between one property and the other. What's the issue? And it's not until I get to the meeting tonight and listen to the debate and I actually am making my mind up on the views that's been made tonight. So, Chairman, members, I have taken note of what's said and I will be supporting what's just been said. And that's probably against my initial views.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bennyworth. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I could actually go along with officer's recommendation here, so long as we apply conditions to it in that the Velux window is nailed shut and obscured glass is put in. I'm afraid I can't go with officer's recommendation and will be supporting Councillor Cole's proposal.
Thank you. I think we're all finished. That's very good. Now, we need to be clear. Our reasons for Mr. Till, Councillor Cole, you've proposed your reasons for if it should be refused.
Well, my reasons, I think, are the privacy and it affects the privacy and the amenity of the adjacent neighbour. I think that is the strongest thing I can say, Chairman. The condition was attached in the first instance, and nothing has changed in the interim. Therefore, I think that we've got to take into account the fact that it is affecting the neighbour, and the fact that it is a tenanted property, and and because of that, there is no certainty that this condition will not be breached in the future.
Thank you. I think Mr. Till might be looking for a condition, a policy that we're saying this is against a policy.
Well, I said in the in my closing statement, it wouldn't the decision would not compromise any of our planning policies, Chairman.
Thank you. Would you agree, Mr. Till, that you could record that as a condition?
I think I think maybe that we will be looking at policy CS14 in particular, in terms of the quality of life in West Berkshire, design, and also tying that to our supplementary planning guidance, which requires such works to consider the privacy and amenity of neighbouring property. So I think there is sufficient there in terms of Councillor Cole's intention to tie this to the policies of the local plan.
Thank you. I feel happier that we've got a policy, a CS14 with a tag on this, as opposed to a general, you know, I don't like the privacy being abused or whatever. Councillor Abbs, you got anything to add on being a second? All covered.
No, sorry, I haven't, Chairman. I think Simon Till covered it very nicely there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's all recorded. So I'm now going to put it to the vote, and the recommendation is for Head of Planning Countryside be authorised to refuse this permission at the bungalow at Down End at Cheveley. And I'll ask Mrs. Armour if she kindly carry out the named vote. This is against officer's recommendation.
So it's to refuse the permission. Councillor Abbs.
For.
Councillor Barnett.
Support refusal.
Councillor Bennyworth.
For.
Councillor Cant.
For.
Councillor Cole.
For.
Councillor Culver.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Wollaston.
For.
Councillor Hooker.
For.
So that's unanimous for refusal.
Thank you very much. That application is refused. Members, thank you very much. We conclude the business just before 10 o'clock. Anything to report, Mr. Till, on appeals at this stage? Just to read the documentation, presumably.
Yes, particularly I would draw members' attention to the fact that flood risk matters, the impact of development on heritage assets, and interpretation of policy on development in the countryside are matters that are focused on in those appeals that are mentioned in section 5 of the committee report.
Thank you very much. Members, this is just notification of the appeals. Councillor Vickers, there's not chance for a debate.
No, I don't want to debate. I would just like to, on a point of information, say that the score in this little list is 7-all. So we didn't do terribly well by normal standards. That's all I say. But an area beat us 1-0, I think.
Okay, thank you, members. That is, I will then therefore close the meeting. Thank you all for your contributions this evening, and close at.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Chair. I did raise an issue right at the beginning when I'd made a declaration that I'm not sure if that should be covered now or not really. If I briefly explain, and there maybe the legal officer could advise, We received, I think most of us received an email from an Alan Pierce from Apex Kitchens about the inspector's appeal decision letter, paragraph 6. I don't want to read it out if it's inappropriate.
It's not for debate here, Councillor Abbs. I'll ask. I've just discussed this with legal, and Mrs. Armour will respond briefly.
I was just going to say, I understand that's about a wider issue than the actual appeal decision. So it's not appropriate to discuss tonight. I think it's something that obviously you can raise with officers afterwards. I think the other issue is I'm not sure we have the appropriate officers here that would be able to fully answer the question. So I think what you should do is address it to officers outside this meeting.
I'll forward it shortly. Thank you.
And you might liaise with Councillor Culver on that one. Thank you very much, everyone. I close the meeting dead on 10 o'clock. Good night.